This show is sponsored by the Comics Shop.
Welcome to Tuesday Chinwag with your host Lee Chalker, writer, artist and creator of the comic series Battle for Buzzle.
G'day and welcome to a Tuesday Chinwag. Do not panic because the guest is otherwise held up by technical issues in the background. So you got me sitting in here for a couple of minutes. So I may as well give you a rundown on what Tuesday Chinwag is. Good evening, Mr. Challoner. All is well that I know of, except for some technical issues. Tuesday Chinwag is based on, a couple of prompting questions: who, what, where, when, why, and how. We rattle through these things. It's a fluid show. We talk about everything, the guest's story, the guru and the doctor. Looking forward to this, as am I, Nick May, but you got me for a couple of minutes until Paul figures out his little bits and pieces behind the background. Clamshell, let's go. Woohoo! I like that enthusiasm. Let's rock and roll, but you got to put up with me for a minute. Jeffrey Beats, g'day all. I'm enjoying these live streams. I came over this channel by accident. Well, it's a good accident. Not all accidents are good, mate, but this is a good one. So thank you for joining us. Absent, hello. There's a lot of comments coming in early, so that's cool. Natty, hello, good evening, Natty SR. Thank you for coming back and watching the show. So yeah, like I said, you just got to put up with me for a bit. So tonight's guest is Dr. Paul Mason. Hopefully this evening we'll find out exactly what he is a doctor about, because God knows I need one, from time to time. But what I will do for you when Paul turns up is we usually have like this pre-show ritual. And because Chinwag is fluid and, I just like it that way, I'm going to show you what the looking forward to the Chinwag tonight. Yes, good stuff. I'll show you what the pre-show ritual is usually, about the checklists that we do to make sure the guest is comfortable, and, some varying other, little funny tidbits here and there. So tonight in the background, we have Nick Quick Cleary. He's doing all the comments and stuff. So a very big thank you to Quick while Shane is busy. What else can we talk about? Looking forward to the show. Matt Rice, thank you for turning up. Man, there are a lot of comments tonight. I'm really looking forward to... hello. I believe Sean is correct, isn't it? I saw her on the... Let's Make a Comic Book the other night. It's Chinwag time. It is indeed. What else can I tell you about Chinwag? Oh, here we go. There's more comments. Make sure you go to 10 p.m. tonight also. Give it a red hot crack for you. I don't mind a little bit of gas bagging. As you can tell, I'm not too bad talking to myself either from time to time. Now, what do we got happening? Just to keep you up to speed. Now, Paul got locked out by passwords because the technical side of things is difficult, and it's not the first time it's happened. And then we ran into trouble with the camera. There's no camera, so he's rebooting his computer, and these are all the things that happen on a Chinwag. So fluidity. So look, before Paul comes on, what I do want to do is in the next week or so, I have that dropping, which is my first comic book in about 2.5 years, Battle for Bustle, Volume 2, Issue 1. So you can check that out when it's released. About a week and a half's time to 2 weeks. They'll be available on the Comics Shop. So let me talk to you about the Comics Shop. That comic shop, which sponsors this show and the other live streams, has over 100 Australian comic books in it. So it's an online shop, and you can get as many comic books as you want, from 1 to 20, for a flat fee of $9. So cut sick. Don't buy, one. You can buy many. Tell us a bit about B for B new issue, Mr. Challoner. All right, I'll go back to it. So this has taken me about 2.5 years, going through an awful lot of mayhem in my life, going through sobriety, going through a spiritual journey, and I came back to comic books, and I've told this story as of who I am now, as opposed to leaving it behind where I was back then. So I guess it's a mild reboot, fresh take, look at the comic shop. Paul Mason, are you there? And can you hear me, good sir?
Yes, I do. I'm sorry, man.
That is okay, mate. That is okay. This is the fluidity of the Chinwag. And I don't want to argue with you anyway, because you'll probably karate chop me or something like that, and I'll end up having to call a real doctor. So we're all good, bud. Hey, what I was just telling people at the start of the show, because you got a whole heap of people saying g'day and hellos and all that at the start of the show too. I thought we might do something a little bit different, because I like being fluid and on the, like on the fly with some of these shows, mate. So
yeah.
We usually have a little bow wow before we start the show, but because people haven't heard, like the pre-show chat, I thought we'd have it now and give them an insight, mate, into what usually happens before. So, sure. All right, and that'll keep you up to speed as well, and just for something funny. All right. So, Paul, look, we do try and keep this show relatively PG. I blew that out. No, like, it's all good.
I used up all my F-bombs now.
I blew that out of the water a couple of weeks ago and was, so I don't know if that rule applies. But look, if you're telling a really good story and it's, and it needs that extra over the line, you just go, mate. You just go, don't stop it. Like, just let it go, man, because the story's always the, the thing that we want, like the punchline. Now, it's a tech grand. Ain't tech grand? Yes, it is, Sean. But we got there, mate. We got there in the end. We always do.
It's me, a notebook full of passwords, trying to find a password for a different browser when my original browser went, oh, no, you can't do this on this browser. I'm like, oh, good. So,
mate, we got there in the end. Now, Paul, the show is fluid. So okay. I can sort of go in any different fashion, mate, but, anywhere all over the place. Now, it's based on who, what, where, when, how, and why, like it's, but it's your story, mate. It's your opportunity to tell your story from little Paul through to Paul right now that has too many passwords. And you can fill us in on all of those details as much as you want. Now, you control the narrative, and I sit back basically and chat to you and talk to you about everything that's going on. And you're frozen, so there you go. You can hear me though still. Now, the other thing I do want to say, there's two things. We are going to get comments, so there will be questions come at you and stuff from everyone watching. And if I broach on a subject that is a little bit sensitive for any means, all right, like, because I'm not in the loop with people and stuff, and sometimes my mind just goes and I've got lots of questions, and sometimes I have people look at me like, oh no, I didn't want to talk about that. The safety word is pickles. So if you yell out pickles or say Lee pickles, then I will and circumvent the thing, all right? So I think we've got it up to speed, man. How's that? You cool?
Yeah, I'm cool.
Yeah, right. Very good. So, mate, now what I'll do is I'll introduce you. Everyone. It's Dr. Paul Mason, in case you hadn't guessed. He's here. He's in the house, all right? So we're ready to rock. Now, Paul, the first question that I always ask, man, is the existential question, and it's one word, and we'll take it from here.
All right.
Are you ready?
Probably.
Don't need a password. We're good to go. All right. Who?
All right. Pickles. No, I'm kidding.
That was early. I hadn't even had a sip of my drink, mate. A chance.
Pickles. No, who is the question? Who? Just a dude, man. Just a dude trying to get by a day at a time, look after my family, and it's keep my hands up and try not to get brain damage. I think that's the that's who. Just I draw, I write, I teach, I live, I love. Yeah, that's that's a horrible answer. I got nothing. Who's hard? Who is something that you're just trying to figure out day by day? I don't know if I'll figure it out, but I'll do my best.
Yeah. Well, the who that look, man, it's an honest answer. I like that. Honesty is a good policy.
That's all I can
But
be, man.
it's a journey, man. It's a journey,
It is a
and
journey.
you've been on a journey from what I can put together in reading your comics and stuff like that. And I mean, you're an athlete, like you're a doctor, you're teaching, you're doing all of these things. So you're a busy dude, man, and you're obviously a Chicago Bulls fan. So
It's funny people say that. Pickle
thankfully,
farmer.
a guy that isn't a pickle farmer. Oh,
Yeah,
Jeffrey. Marty. All right.
No, the Chicago Bulls thing, it's not that I'm a fan of the team per se. I mean, it's obviously a bit of nostalgia. I remember in the 90s, playing basketball in school time and stuff like that. No, I watched a doco, The Last Dance, during the pandemic, and I watched it at least 2 or 3 times over. And there was, I guess there were certain mindsets in that doco that I dug, but in particular, there was in the original documentary, they were missing Luke Longley, who was the Aussie who played on the second three-peat that the Bulls were able to do with Michael Jordan. And Australia's Story did a 2-parter that you could probably find on the ABC iView, where they followed up with Luke Longley after all these years, and they talked to him about being on that team. And, he had some interesting thought processes of how he was when he was competing, what he had to be in order to be on that team, and especially working with guys like Michael Jordan, who are pretty intense from all accounts. And then what that mindset became once it was all over, and some of the things that he said kind of resonated with me. Now, it's not something that I, when I stopped sort of competing, or at least competing was done with me. I guess there was still elements of me that the analyzing never stops. So so Luke was talking about some of those aspects. Now, he dissolved a marriage and took it out on other people. Like when his analyzing was no longer there, he started to either internalize it or he'd externalize it onto other people. And that's not me. I don't do that, but I know that I'm still always trying to seek that level of improvement in whatever I'm trying to do, if that doesn't sound wanky. But like for instance with martial arts, right? Like I did 5 world championships, and I competed for 20 years, and there was a point when I was in a tournament last year, and I decided that was it for me, because I was fighting dudes half my age, and I thought, this is getting silly and I don't enjoy it anymore. Well, I do, but I don't. You know what I mean? There's things in my head that I know I can and can't do anymore with, the arthritic hip and bits and pieces. So, but I can be in a room and see someone, like if I'm in a gym, for instance, and someone goes up to the heavy bag, and I see them put their hands up, put their feet into a position, they throw one punch, and I can, from across the room in my peripheral vision, not paying attention to them, I can still tell you 3 things they did wrong. So it's just that kind of thing. So I guess the Bulls is less about the team and more about the attitude.
Or the
reminder of, whatever. So
And here's Alex Major. Eh? Like the Bulls suck. They beat my beloved Jazz. Oh well,
I can
Alex. Hey,
Yeah.
this will be an interesting chat. Yes, it will be, Alex, and and squish to the Jazz, mate, not being good enough. But
Yeah, well, I don't know.
yeah, I know. I just like playing with like Alex and for the moment Jazz fans because I know nothing about them other than they're from Utah.
Yeah, I was going to say that Utah. Yeah, absolutely. I feel like that was where Karl Malone played in the '90s, but I could be wrong. I don't know.
Yeah. I remember Karl Malone. I think he's here's a bit of trivia while we're on basketball. Not that I follow it too much. I'm a bit more of an NFL man, but
Watch 2
he's
minutes whole game as
yeah,
far
yeah.
as but anyway.
I think Karl Malone is the number one, the highest scoring basketballer in history, or was. Like he is more than Jordan and stuff like that. But
Sure.
man, I also watched the Chicago Bulls documentary on Netflix a few years ago, and I got an awful lot out of it as well. Like how dedication can be like really singularly minded. You know what I mean? And you can attribute it to just about any facet of life, really, I guess. The other thing, I didn't know much about Luke Longley, but I was aware that he was in the second part of the three-peat, and I didn't realize that he obviously had some personal, I guess, some mental health sort of issues and vibes with how to emote, like himself and his feelings and stuff. And you just talking about that, like I've been through that myself, mate, and I'm still going through it. So I'm glad for Luke to have come out on the other side and be more positive in things, and anyone else that goes through mental health. There's plenty of places that you can go and people to talk to if you're not feeling 100%, that can try and put you on the right path and do the best thing you can. Because we're very Comex, myself and Sis are, and the rest of the crew are like mental health is very important, mate. Like we all have battles with that at different times, whether it's, I guess, imposter syndrome or not feeling as good as we can be, or we're not the people we want to be and stuff. But it's yeah, everyone's special. You're unique. So, when you realize that, like, things are good. Now, Paul, obviously with your martial arts, man, and you just knew it was time, other than the arthritic hip, mate. You just knew it was time to I better hang the belt up, mate. You know what I mean? Like I've got some other things to do, or what natural feeling?
Not necessarily the martial arts, but just the competition stuff. Like as I said, I was in a tournament and I had, I came away with a bronze, but I just boxed. You know what I mean? An occasional kick. So I was limited in the tools that I had available to me. You never know if there was an opportunity where the world opens up a bit more, if there's another world championship, I have the money, there's a seniors division or veterans or whatever, and it seems doable, then I would consider it. But as it stands, I realized 2017 I had the opportunity to compete. I was assistant coach, I was like the sparring coach, and the tournament was in the Netherlands, and at the time I was covering in an acting art direction lecturer role at uni, so I was working full time, and I had a kid fan deadline every couple of months, so I had to make a decision. I was going into tournaments, drawing pages minutes before I had to go and fight, or finishing off a lecture or something like that. So I made the decision that I trained the team up until they had to leave country, and then I didn't go. I stayed back so I could supervise third-year film projects and try and do a good job in the role that I had, and sort of preserve some of my sanity at the same time. So, afterwards, and then when the pandemic hit, I was training, and I just had the urge one day what's the term I'm looking for? The you know, when you're enlightened, something comes to you. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
That's thought in my head. You know, training in my, like I went out like everyone else and raided sort of fitness equipment and got a heavy bag and set it up in my garage or whatever. And I thought I was training for a fight that I was probably never going to have.
Yep.
And it was silly, kind of, you know, thinking about, you know, the way that we fight in a tournament setting when it can be completely, well, it is completely different when you're fighting or you're practicing or you're training from a traditional martial art or a self-defense scenario. So you know, you're no longer looking for points, or you're no longer doing certain techniques that are going to be beneficial to you from a sports angle, because it is a game in a sense, it is a sport. So rather than focus on that aspect, I just pivot to something else that is my strength. Much like if you were, you know, doing comic book work, you know, you stretch yourself as far as, you know, you can, and you always keep seeking possibilities, but it's always you know, you always have to have that level of perspective to be able to work within your means so that you're optimizing what you're able to achieve at the time. And then, you know, so it's that kind of, I guess, that process. But martial arts, you know, I still train martial arts. You know, I did a few recent seminars, one with the UFC champ that won on the weekend, Alex Pereira. So, you know, it's nice to sort of get out there and flex a little bit. We did that wasn't the taekwondo stuff. That was more of the kickboxing stuff. So I got to, you know, jump around and do a few things there. So I'm always going to be doing it. I'll do it until I've, you know, I can't physically move no more. So
Yeah. No, no, man. It's like obviously that's something you've done since you're a little fella as well. Like little Paul was doing it, or was that something that you got into in your teens, like sort of sport?
yeah, like preteen. I'd say about 10 or 11 years old. Even before, I mean, before that, little Paul did some boxing, but little Paul was a sook. Uh, little Paul didn't like getting punched in the face, and the boxing gym that I was going to at the time, like a PCYC, we'd jump on the bus and catch it down to Coolangatta and go to the PCYC there. And I was in like year 4, year 5, and yeah, it wasn't for me at the time. But after trying, you know, I tried football for a bit. Good at tackling, not really good with the ball skills. Tried soccer for a bit. Good at tackling, but not very good with the ball skills.
Yeah.
And then
Seems to be a theme popping up here, mate.
yeah, I just, you know, not to get too deep into it, but living in a sort of a, you know, before we met my dad, who's really my stepdad, we were in a, you know, a pretty tough situation for many years, and I decided that self-defense and not being able to handle myself, I wanted to sort of rectify that. So I got into martial arts when I was 11, 12, that age, you know. That kind of period where I think most people, you know, whatever you're sort of into, that kind of solidifies in a way of, you know, I was reading comic books and getting into martial arts and watching Bruce Lee films, and, you know, that you know, I've been doing that ever since. So.
Yeah, no, man, that's perfect. Like that's you know, like you're obviously you're impassioned about your martial arts because I look, I mean, I won't go into too much detail either, but I grew up in by no fault of my lovely mother who worked her butt off for me to get me through school and that, but I grew up in housing commission homes in a pretty rough neck of the woods back in the early mid '80s up here in Townsville. They're like I didn't we didn't have martial arts per se, but we had soccer and football and I totally get the whole like wanting to be physical and, you know, like feel like you were I guess, physically capable of handling yourself if ever yourself or, like my mum, and that was threatened, at any stage. So I totally get that, man. And sport, look, the other thing is too, Paul, I mean, like from what I know of sport, I mean, I haven't played it since probably late 20s, mid to late 20s. The discipline that you learn from sport, particularly like I've never done martial arts and stuff, but other friends of mine that have done it, they're constantly telling me that lessons that they've learned, you know what I mean, they can apply to everything that they're doing in whether it be life or whether it be, like their careers, etc. So, I mean, I think that's a pretty awesome thing. Backflip. Barky, Rosie is going to bed. Does anyone want me to bring her in to say goodnight?
That's my partner. If you can hear me, you can bring her in.
Absolutely. You can always, man, that dude, the show is fluid. It's always good to bring like people in to say g'day and good night and all that sort of stuff. Oh, I love it, man. It's cool.
Amanda's my assistant editor and sometimes writing collaborator with Fru. Rosie, can you see her? Is she on camera?
I see Rosie. Look at her. Beautiful.
Waving.
Hello. What's happening, Rosie? Are you good? You're going to bed. Oh, what's she like? Got a seed there or something?
I think she's eating a seed. It's a bride.
Oh, yeah. Look at it go. That's her snack before the curtain comes down over the cage, eh?
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, how old Rosie, man?
She is probably our age.
True.
Yep, absolutely. She was a rescue bird. She came into the vet. Yeah, she came into the vet several hundred grams overweight. Sort of their natural weight is around about the 200 to 300 grams, and she was like 500 grams, 500 plus, with a lot of fatty.
Has she been eating like the wrong seed or something like that?
I think whoever her previous owners were that maybe dumped her in the park were feeding her like biscuits and sandwiches and stuff like that, like human food, and she was morbidly obese. So we ended up, we brought her home. She went through an operation. It was on Totally Wild, by the way, if you remember that show.
I do remember Totally Wild. Yeah, well, Rosie's winning everyone over here, Paul, and g'day to Dave Dye. So back to Rosie's tale of rescue.
Yeah, so Rosie came to us and we put her on a strict diet, looked after her, big cage, gave her some place to be loved, and it wasn't long after our previous rescue bird, Cheezel, who's a yellow cockatiel. She was also a rescue that her owners had dumped at the vet when they didn't want to pay a bill. So Rosie's now back down to a regular weight and was given the thumbs up by the vet recently. All the feathers, good, cut up all the veggies and look after her. We get up and do that every morning. So, she's good companion.
Looking after a bird, saving a lovely piece of nature's life. Years ago, I had a hand-reared rainbow lorikeet, man, called Murphy, and man, I love birds. My granddad was a bird keeper, and I was lucky enough years ago to get a hand-reared rainbow lorikeet, and this bird used to like sit on the collar of my dogs and walk around and the thing is that blows my mind about birds is, man, they're the most amazing problem solvers. You know what I mean? Like I used to set up things for Murphy to spend time working out, and you'd be off doing something else, so whether it was drawing or reading or something, and then next thing you'd hear and you'd walk out and problem solved, and you'd be like, what? Oh, there you go. From Matt Rice, did Rosie make an appearance as part of Flock?
Yeah, actually all the birds that feature in Flock and will eventually feature more prominently in the subsequent issues when I finish them, are all based on real birds. So Rosie the galah, of course, Cheezel the cockatiel, yes. Chucky's a blue quaker that passed away sadly a number of years ago. It was my partner's bird. And there's another bird who's a friend of ours. That's a gang cockatoo named Rocco. Rocco's like a Pokemon because the only word it knows how to say is its own name. So it's kind of. But yeah, what you were saying resonates. I'm in the same.
No, they're amazing creatures, man.
This is actually, here we go.
Yeah.
This is Cheezel.
Yeah.
Cheezel is a yellow female cockatiel. She's a bit more angry than Rosie, probably because it's her bedtime, but she's...
You're on TV, mate. You shouldn't be angry. You should be happy. Look at you. You're a star.
She's she already knows she's a star. She's
oh man, there you go. I'll sit up here, Dad. I'll keep my eye on you.
Short films and sorry, what? Gallery exhibitions. She's she's been in a number of things, and it doesn't seem to faze her. She's still a prima donna regardless of what she's in. So.
Yeah. That's cool. No, I'm just looking at her there, man. She's like chilling around, doing a little puff up and like little in the feathers, like. Yeah. Well, man, I like my bird so much that my drawing chair is the old clamshell Cheezel. My drawing chair, I've never changed it because Murphy used to take bites out of the.
All right.
When she was cranky, and I still, and it's ratty and it's falling apart, but I still like to, think that Murph was sitting there. I like birds too, man.
When Cheezel was in the paper, when the paper came out and did something about Kid Phantom when it first started, I'm acquaintances with Greg Capullo, and he sent me a photo, and it was him in his studio with a cockatiel on his shoulder too, in the same kind of photo position. So I think a lot of artists, whether it's cats or birds, or in his case for a while he had a few sugar gliders that used to chew the chair and the walls and stuff while he would draw. Dogs as well. I think being such a solitary pursuit at times, it's nice to have a companion even if they're just present.
Yeah, I agree, man. I've got two dogs. They're in here with me all the time, and the cats are inside. I've got cats these days. I wish I could have birds again, but unfortunately, it's the cats rule inside, and they have their place too, man. They're cool. That's cool. Animals. Look at us go, mate. Talking about so much happening, man. Resonating left, right, and centre.
A derailment, but that's okay.
Yeah, it's all right, man. This is the fluidity of the Chinwag, Paul. Like, there's no real, structure, man. It's just two dudes talking about things they enjoy, mate. So it's and that's how it is, mate. Let's take you back to little Paul, and what was it? And what was your first thing that drew you into the world of comics? Because you started off with your martial arts and comics. You said at the same time. So, what was the thing that you picked up that really caught your eye, mate?
I mean, when I think about it, when I was a kid, I remember for a while there we couldn't stay at home. My mum and I had to leave, and for a while we were staying with mum's friends. I would have been in maybe year 2 or year 3, and I knew at that point I always wanted to draw. We used to draw stuff in class. I think Batman, Adam West reruns were on television at the time, and every day for year 1 or kindy journal time, we used to have to write or draw something about the day, and every day I would just draw Batman beating up some villain ad nauseum till my teacher got sick of it. I recall one day, it would always be the setting, the Batmobile would be there, Batman and Robin, and X would be getting the snot punched at him. And one day I did one where they were both like this on the hood of the car, not being able to find any crime. So I knew that, like, I always wanted to sort of be a cartoonist, not really knowing what that was, but just knowing that they drew for a living. I do remember on Careers Day, though, like having to draw like what we wanted to be. And I drew a cop, wanting to be a cop, but then realizing that the drawing of the cop was probably better than, wanting to actually be one. Anyway, we couldn't live at home. We were living with friends. They didn't have a television. They had a fish tank in place of a television, so you could just watch the fish.
Yeah.
But they also had a pile of phantoms, old sort of Fru phantoms that I sort of got a hold of and was flicking through and like, what are these, and then as I sort of progressed in primary school, school libraries and even sort of local libraries, you could find Asterix and Tintin quite quickly. And I was always kind of drawn to them. And then eventually, along with cartoons being on Saturday morning and the X-Men animated series and then Spider-Man, by that stage, there was a young guy in class who I was friends with who was also liked to draw, and we used to draw a lot of like Nickelodeon stuff or, Marvel stuff. He would bring in comic books to read during, reading time. So then I would start picking up comic books from the newsagent or the local secondhand bookstore. There was a really good one at one point in Coolangatta. They must have had a connection with some sort of warehouse overseas, so they could get in like brand new direct edition, direct market comics for like, and then would just sell them for $2.50. Regardless of what it was.
Hello.
Yeah. So I used to get pocket money, save it up, and then go in and grab a handful of comics. So that's, I guess that, I would just keep buying them. I mean, I only stopped buying them regularly sort of mid to late 90s when, I was a big Spider-Man fan. So when the Clone Saga had finished and it had gone on way longer than it should have, I kind of lost a bit of interest, and then pocket money, you could only afford, what do I get? Kung Fu lessons, comic books. So
yeah.
So I didn't really pick up buying sort of new standard comic books again until like I was in uni and working part-time. So, but I've always sort of just gravitated towards those sorts of comic books. I mean, I haven't read a regular sort of monthly edition comic book in, I don't know, 10 to 15 years or so. But, you occasionally flick through something or pick something up. But yeah, I guess that's where it started off when I was, little and looking for some sort of escapism.
Yeah. No, well, mate, it's comic books have that beautiful ability too, and I really enjoyed the fact that a lot of people that are listening now and watching, like in past, present, future, 3D, 4D, 5D, all those sorts of dimensions, and that would love the fact that Phantom was your man, to begin with, and so much of your work now is Phantom as well. So Sean Che has just sent a question for you, mate. Was Batman sort of self-therapy and or comforting in that situation you were in?
To be honest, I think by the time I was sort of getting into reading kind of the American, say, mainstream superhero books, I was already out of that situation. Because it wasn't until I was out of that situation, and I'd met my stepdad, and I was just starting to buy Spider-Man comics at that point. and because I was getting, and then I was able to like have a normal kind of childhood of pocket money and doing chores for pocket money, and that sort of thing. Like I had to become self-sufficient as a kid, and my mum was, just like what you were saying, was doing her best, and single mum, and like trying to raise me under the circumstances and protect me. But you can't protect people all the time. I grew up with a lot of reruns on television, and comics were, at that point, I'd say, were newspaper strips, and you kind of have to grow up quick, is what I'm saying. So, by the time I was like maybe 10 or 11, and out of that situation, that's when I sort of was buying the Spider-Mans off the shelf, or I was reading, Daredevil, Man Without Fear, graphic novel from the library. And I mean, Batman specifically, I was more into him from like other media, like the cartoon series and the movies, rather than the comics. I think one of my first Batman comics I bought was when I was going to my first World Championships in '03. And if you remember Borders, when they used to be around, I went in and I picked up Long Halloween, and there was something about Tim Sale's artwork that I sort of thought, well, this is chunky. This will last the flight to Greece, and I'll,
It didn't, did it? No.
I was the nerd reading the Long Halloween on the plane, and then when I ran out, I read The Art of War.
Sun Tzu.
Yeah, Sun Tzu. So. So Batman specifically, no, but Spider-Man, I do recall, like, there were times where, like, when my dad was in, when my mum had, I was going to say funny story. It's not really that funny. My mum, my mum was got proposed to on Christmas. Would have been mid-90s by my dad, and 2 days later he was in a hospital in a coma, and over the course of that month he whatever, the doctors still don't really know what had occurred, but they had to cut him right open and flush his blood 3 times, and he died, several times, as they say. Or Mum had to go in and say her goodbyes a few times during the course of that month. It was insane. But I remember being taken into the hospital up to intensive care to visit him at one point when he had woken up and was recovering from surgery. And I hated hospitals, and I still do to this day. I struggle with them. So I had my face buried in a Spider-Man magazine. I recall it's the issue where Juggernaut goes to kill Madam Web. It's an early John Romita Jr. I just remember it vividly, reading that comic, because it distracted me from the tubes and everything going into Dad, and the scar and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, it's funny what you remember years later, certain stories. And,
it's the vivid imagery that you remember too from childhood. I will just say though, Paul, that I am going to remember about you after this interview, that when you say I've got a funny story, I might just hold back on, like, okay,
we laugh about it. We laugh about it now because you can distance and time from it. But back in the day, it's probably not the funniest thing.
Mate, that would have been like traumatic, like one of the happiest moments of your mum and your life, I guess. Like that suddenly, like, that happens. But I'm starting to see how the escapism of comic books and the physicality, man, and the dropping into that like the stream of conscious, like into the zone, like the physicality of the martial arts and stuff, has obviously helped you from a young man. get you, through some tough times, man. And I'm assuming that because I've found that, like I've been through myself some difficult times over the years, and people that have watched this show for a bit know that I'm a really big believer in that like creativity has a healing factor to it, like even if it's just, sitting down doing things for fun and painting, gardening, cooking, whatever your form of creativity is, it's amazing when you just can just let things go for a little bit to give yourself some freedom and some thought, you know what I mean, to be with yourself and just find a little bit of peace, you know what I mean, like before you have to go back out into the outside world and things, because I think peace is a nice thing. So it's good to find it any way you can. Because I have to tell you that I love the long Halloween as well. And in recent years, I nearly fell over when I saw it, but I came across, they did black and white editions of the long Halloween and the second one, whatever.
The second one.
Yeah. And they did black and white hardback version. So, yeah, they took Tim Sale's artwork, stripped it of all the color, obviously black and white. And man, like I've gone over those comic books so many times looking at it in black and white. I just like black and white. I love all comics, mate, but I've got a little thing for black and white,
Yeah, I do too. And it's funny, like if I had my way, like I'm working on a book right now, and if I had my way, I'd just keep it black and white. But I know that they want it in color, or at least, portions of it. It's a big argument in the Phantom world, and I kind of laugh at I shouldn't laugh at other people's opinions, but they back it up with such personal opinions, and because they feel it so strongly, they mistaken feelings as facts. And when you look at, they say, oh, if it's not in color, then it's not going to sell well, because comics that should be in color, they sell well. And it's like, yes, until you say that most manga is in black and white and are outstripping all the color books. So what's your argument? Like it's an aesthetic thing. It's something that you've probably grown up with, that's going to influence it, or maybe as a creator, like the appeal of just seeing the ink line and the artist's hand, is interesting. Tim Sale's case, he was colorblind, so you could see that what he would see is the closer to his particular aesthetic in a way. So these arguments are quite funny. I feel like in some cases, though, I do enjoy seeing certain works in color. It depends on the color treatment and the approach that the artist has taken. If there's a simpatico element to it, depends on the work, I suppose. But there's some, like it's like what Sterenko used to say: you can ruin art with bad coloring. It's funny how for a long time with American books, in that sense of how color was the last line, or the last thing considered or left to the printers to kind of deal with, and yet it's the first thing you notice when you look at the work. Same as lettering, like people palm off lettering and sort of treat it as an afterthought and have less consideration of it. But what's the first thing you look at when you go to read the book? So it's
I mean, there's art form like in all through like comic books, like, and some of it is hidden. Like, I mean, I've got mates. Like, I've read my fair share of, like colored comics, obviously. I have a particular appreciation of black and white because I like drawing black and white. I find that, here we go. Comics. Feeling. Flock is awesome. Fact. Flock is awesome. Very good. There you go. I like the fact that black and white is really, there's nowhere for the person that's drawing to go. Like, if you make a mistake, like it's so concentrated that if you make a mistake, it's obvious. It's a bit of a thrill, you know what I mean? Like to do that artwork. Yeah, but when you come to color, I've
Mhm.
always found, like, for me, when I read comic books, and I notice color too, when it seems to be someone else doing the colors on someone else's artwork, now I'm picturing colorists like Big Oil or mob bosses. um, do you, like, with some of your work, are you happier with your colored work when you're doing the colors, or when someone else is doing the colors? And we'll come back to that comment in a tick after you.
Um, that's a good question. I've always found color tricky, and I say it to students all the time that color is tricky. I feel like it's one of those things in some cases where some student, like, if you don't know what you don't know. So
Mm,
sometimes, like I feel like coloring is a lot like good and bad inking in a way, that
yeah,
you, or at least the attitude of what like an Alex Toth might consider, when it comes to that sort of element of the craft, where you could spend, or at least he used to say, I spent half my life trying to figure out what to put into a drawing, and then half my life trying to figure out what to leave out. So I feel like that's where I'm at in terms of color. Like
yeah,
I like to approach color in a very simple way. But I know that in some cases, I feel like I look at some of my old work, and I definitely know some of my old work that I've overdone the color. And even in some recent work, I feel like maybe the color is a bit too much. So I'm always trying to figure out a less is more approach.
yeah,
Sometimes I see other people's colors on my work, and I think, well, those aren't necessarily the choices that I would make. In most cases, if it's like a Justin Randall, when Justin Randall colored Elrich Kid, Bone War, um, I knew that they weren't choices that I would have made, but
mm,
there was some lovely scenes that I felt elevated the work immensely, particularly where it took me a long time to, or whether I even felt comfortable by the end of the work, doing that work. So I felt like you were saying earlier, I could probably hide behind some of Justin's colors and it would turn out okay. Um, so I always have there's sometimes it's very rare that I color or do something that I go, oh, that's exactly how I intended it in my head. You know,
mm,
I have an approach to comics in general that's very much like, well, I'll do better next time. And
yeah,
that's like, I'll do my best now with what I have
yep,
available to me. But if it doesn't turn out the way that I intended it, well, then I'll do better next time. And I think that's, I mean, you could have other people's attitude could be, oh, well, that suck, and they stop. So I think at least with the I'll do better next time, you persevere and you learn and you continue to try to improve on what you're doing. So
yeah,
um,
100%, man. That's a good positive attitude to leave off a page, for example. Now, we've got Sean Chase. She's got, I've always felt color should be another character like backgrounds. It's there to help set tone and tell the story. If it's not doing that, probably better to not include it.
yeah, that's
So that,
true. Color definitely has to serve the story. Everyone has to serve the story in some way, shape, or form. And there's plenty of times where I feel like it either doesn't serve the story, or it even is at odds with perhaps what the penciler and or inker, if it's the same person or a different person, what they intended.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
Sometimes people have a blanket approach to their coloring, which is not a one size fits all to it. Some people don't consider the how the line work interacts with the approach to color, or even where the line or the light source should be in
mm,
respects to what the intended focal point or readability of the page should be with that sort of approach too. So yeah, definitely color needs to enhance the story. In many ways, some people approach the color in a realistic manner, and I feel as though you can do that, but I feel like color should help reinforce aspects of the storytelling, down to an emotional level. So where applicable, color and lighting should help to enhance or pull back whatever it needs to do in that particular moment of time, for the sake of the storytelling that you're trying to achieve at that particular moment. So
yeah. That makes perfect sense to me, man. That it adds to things. Comic bucket tool. Now, Paul, I'm going to double back a tick because we just had two comments. One was from Ryan O'Connor. If Sis can bring that up in the background, because Sis is. Here we go. Letters from Ryan O'Connor. Letters are icons, and comics is the language of iconography. So that's one comment from Ryan. And there was another one that popped up there too about From Hell from Matt Rice. So I think Matt likes From Hell's approach of releasing in black and white and a separate color version. Guess that covers all bases for everyone that's likes both fields, I guess,
Yeah, I dig that. I mean, some stories, I feel like the storytelling can be enhanced by color in a way that if you've got changing scenes, perhaps changing points of time, you can visually clarify those very simply by the color choices that are made. So I kind of appreciate those. The colorists that the two main problems I often see, or at least repel me from colors, are one where all the colors are done correctly, and by that I mean if you're reading like in a mainstream book, Superman's cape's red, costume is blue, sky's blue, grass is green, like that bores me to tears.
Yep.
The other one where I feel like they're throwing everything at the page to the point of not understanding where your focals should be. So the highlight, everything is given equal sort of treatment in regard, like highlight, regardless of how close it is to the light source.
Yep.
So it's like, why is the grass glowing the same as the guy's chest and gun and face, and what should I be looking at? You know what I mean? So if as an inker you're trying to replicate a texture by way of line work, then the coloring should also take into consideration what the texture should be. So why is the cloth glowing the same as the metal or the wood in that scene? So that's my other pet peeve there, the overuse of those certain elements. So,
that makes 100% sense. Because you do have to take into consideration textures, light sources. Again, that's just a primary example of how much thought goes into not just like even putting down the synopsis of the comic book and story you're telling, all of the little levels that you've got to go through to make all of these languages, fit in the translation of things, so that the viewer, the reader can enjoy them. Man, I want to, excuse me, you mentioned before, like the Eldritch Kid, and that was the first time that years ago for Gestalt that I'd heard of yourself, and Christian D. Reed, I believe, was the writer, and Justin Randall was the colorist, and that was one of the first times that I'd seen you. Did you have previous work before the Eldritch Kid, or was that your first time punching out a comic like that? Like, what was your story coming into comic books, man?
After would have been my second World Championship in 2005, I just finished a uni degree, my first uni degree, had a fine arts major attached, and a lot of the work that I was doing was, still dabbling in comic material. So I wanted to draw, and I was looking for work, and I fell into cartooning. I was a cartoonist for a little while there, not in the sort of the sense that I sort of consider the old school Jack Kirby term of cartoonist now, of a writer and artist of their own work, but more of the like event cartooning and that sort of thing, or doing kids workshops and stuff like that. And, in the meantime, I went. I made a point of going back to the newsagent and buying comic books again, just to see what was out there and what was doing. And I'd had a very nice rejection letter from Joe Quesada, like in 2004. Back when Marvel was still accepting submissions, but they were like the first comic pages I'd done since I was a child. So, it's kind of like the opposite of like everything that you should do. It's like had fully rendered pencils and like stuff just kind of exploding out of panels, and there's still some fun elements of it, but it was really like, it wasn't the less is more approach. And I went to, I would have been the old Comics Kingdom, and was sort of investigating what sort of Australian comics were out there at the time. I found these bunch of guys who were doing like indie comics. So I started sort of doing a little bit of work with them. After a while, there was a bit of a falling out, but while I was working with those guys, I met Chris Sequeira, who's now the editor of IPI. I think you may have even chat to him in the past. So I met Chris. Yeah, so I met Chris at a con, and through these guys in 2008, and by then I'd done my animation degree and was going into my honors degree. I'd done a few like little indie comics here and there, but nothing serious. The honors project, I started studying comics, and I made my own comic, which was The Soldier Legacy.
That, from memory, sorry to interrupt you, that you just brought me back there. That was on a. I first came across that. Now you mentioned that on a TV documentary or an ad or something like that. Yeah.
So that was a lucky thing where I had gotten my books printed through that particular printer, and Chris was working with that printer because their publishing arm in comics was where Chris was doing his Sherlock Holmes series.
Yeah.
So that
was a Jeffries, because Black House was doing that. Yeah, I love that Sherlock Holmes series, man. Yeah,
me too. Me too. That was some of my first published work was in that series. I did a pin-up for Chris, but he was really encouraging. And I'd also, at that con, I did some sample pages, and I was still working on Soldier Legacy at the time, the first issue. And I decided I took it. Someone convinced me to go and talk to Todd McFarlane, and I laughed at him and said, "Why would I do that? That's absurd." And he made a point of saying, well, when Todd was trying to get editor's attention, he'd corner him in a bathroom with his sample material and wouldn't let him out until he looked at his pages. So I'm like, oh, well, I guess that it won't bother him if I went and got some feedback from him. And he spent a good half an hour with me, held up his cue, did some drawings on my pages, on the plastic sleeves, to talking about pushing the pose and that sort of stuff. So it was really encouraging. So Soldier Legacy was my first sort of comic book that I did. And then I did a second, and I think I did the second issue at that point. And Baden at Black House said, would you like to join the stable? So that was nice. I started doing Soldier Legacy books with Black House. And in 2011, he was approached by an ad company that were looking to do, they were looking for an IP to use in a UE insurance commercial, where this guy is in a comic store and he's talking about this comic book, and they liked the Soldier. I think at the time it was back when Gestalt was still, they were early. They'd been going for a couple of years, but the Deep had just come out. So it was sort of around that era, like the Deep was getting pushed as a cartoon a couple of years after that. But I think at the time they were looking around at different properties. But I think the Aussie kind of slouch hat thing must have appealed to them. So yeah, that was in the commercial. So that was kind of fun.
That's cool. It's cool.
Yeah. But yeah, so I kept doing Soldier for a number of years, and I kept going to conventions. I went with Chris to a couple of San Diego Comic Cons, and I utilized, a lot of the panels and the interviews that I was doing over there as like research for my doctorate that I went on to do after my honors. And my doctorate was kind of an extension of that first Soldier Legacy issue. It was kind of I wouldn't say experimenting, because that sounds a bit wanky, but it was more about like trying different comic making methodologies, working with Chris with a plot driven kind of Marvel method, or working on a script. When I did an early Human Fly story back in 2013, or working as a cartoonist, writing and drawing my own work. So there was a multitude of different things that I was sort of writing about in that original paper, and talking about what Aussie comics were, and possibilities of studying and making that sort of material, because there wasn't many sort of how-tos in regards to making Aussie comics back in the day. So yeah, so that Soldier Legacy was an extension of that. And then while sort of in San Diego, I met the Gestalt guys. And then, I continued the relationship when I came back to Australia, being a guest at cons for many years. You see the same sort of core people, and I would, go and get feedback from Wolfgang and talk to him. And at a certain point, him and Chris, like I used to sit around with Christian and Andrew Constant and just talk Kirby stories in the bar after the cons, and just shoot the breeze. And I think one day it was just like, hey, do you want to do something? And that's where sort of Bone War kind of came from. Yeah.
That's cool. Like, that's with your doctorate, man. Because I mean, you're right. Like, because I come from Townsville in far north Queensland, so that's big city. It's not rural. It's in the middle there. I can't remember the
Trained up there a few times. It's great. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I it's my hometown. There's lots of sun, mate. Don't worry about that. You're right, because there wasn't a lot of how to do comic books at all, and I reckon that's awesome that you decided to do that and like basically write about your whole experience with your comic book. You know what I mean? And going about and learning and that, because there is, I mean, I do not have the body of work that you do, man, and I'm by far, like a lot of work in terms of my artistic ability and writing ability to get anywhere near you are at this stage. But I have
down to lift me up.
Oh man, dude, look, I'm not talking down about myself, brother. I just know that I've got work to do, and I enjoy doing the work, like, and that's so I'm cool with that. But from from working with people that do different approaches too. I mean, it's so handy that you like did that paper for people to read. Hopefully that's available for people to read, because you do get people that prefer to give you a synopsis and then you do the artwork and then they fiddle around with it with you and then they come and put the script, and then there are those that give you a script that are like, I want it like this, and like if you do think slightly, oh, maybe if we did, no, stick to the script, like everyone has like such their own styles of like working with people. Do you find that um did you find that working with people, that your best work with people was when you felt a chemistry with them, like when you're in a rock and roll band? You know what I mean? Like if you're in a, how bands have chemistries, or did you just sort of, like, I'm digging that crew there, I really like that work we did, or were you more, I suppose, motivated from the perspective of that idea is like it's snapping onto me right now, and I like where that's heading. I'm going to go that way regardless of whoever's working on it, because I think there's something there. How's your mind work, man?
Yeah, it's interesting. Like I I'm in the process of writing this. I'm turning my that original thesis was done, 20. I think I handed it in 2015, and I developed a comics course at the university that I've taught for like 6 years or so. Yeah, I think we started. Yeah, I think this might be coming up to the 6th year or whatever. I can't remember, but it's been a while. So I'm developing that into a sort of a big handbook of anyone that, if you've never done a comic, this could teach you how to do a comic from idea to kind of finish. So I'm in the process of that, and then sort of doing that elements of that as an online course. So I'm sort of thinking about this stuff again, about the different approaches that people can take, and that's the great thing about comics. I think everything that you said is valid. With some projects, it's about, I think ultimately, if you want to be a professional, you regardless of whether you're getting paid or you just amateur or whatever, you still should think what you want to be. So if you want to be professional, you approach it with that mindset of, if you're working with somebody and you get a script, it's about kind of servicing that script as best as you can, and hoping that in the process, whatever your situation is that you're in, that you have some sort of leeway in respects to what you read and how you want to interpret that story for the page. Whether you follow it to the T regardless and never have a conversation with the writer, or you have a conversation with a writer and see how flexible things are. I think outside of a company structure or a format that Australia it's very rare to kind of have that format. I think that should be allowable, that it's a collaborative effort, and it should be based on that chemistry aspect. So it's kind of a combination of both in that sense. I know, everyone's going to have their own or their different approaches to it regardless. And I feel like sometimes working with a writer, like when I worked with Andrew on, that comment's correct. Just want to acknowledge that.
Everyone has their own creative process. Shane will bring that up. Sorry to interrupt you, Paul. We'll just read that comment for people listening that can't see the screen. Everyone has their own process. There is not right or wrong way to create art.
Yeah, correct. And I think that there needs, regardless of what it is in terms of comics, I think let's just say that there's a certain element or a certain level, if you're treating it like an art form that you're working on. Yes, there's a lot of leeway. If you're working from a commercial standpoint, then there's a different set of parameters that we have to talk about in that sense. But I think working with a writer, like when I worked with Andrew on Kid Phantom, it's that element of trust that's involved with any sort of writer-artist collaboration. And if you trust that person and you want to do right by the material, I think that's going to go a long way into elevating what you're trying to do or what you're trying to achieve in that sense. I feel like I'm losing tenuous grasp on sort of what your question is, but I feel like the one point that I did want to say was when I worked with Andrew, um, he elevated what I can do, or at least gave me confidence in my own writing later as to what I could do. Because if you're trying to service that particular story, they're going to encourage you to do things that you may not necessarily write for yourself. And I
Yep.
think the stretching and the problem solving of how to achieve that particular moment, I think is really important for the development of the artist, particularly from a sense of a comic artist should be able to do anything that's thrown at him in that regard. And though I like the idea of a writer saying, hey, what do you want to draw? I feel like there still should be some onus on the writer to push the artist if you're working in that collaborative approach.
Yeah, I understand that. I particularly appreciate the fact that you so eloquently put that you were veering off from my question. I can't remember how you put it, but that was really cool. You're losing your tenuous grasp. I was like, yes, I like that. So, very good. Very
good. Speak. Sorry, I don't mean to.
That's okay, mate. That's okay. Now, Ryan O'Connor, for everyone listening, you've been working on Deadline for many years, plus with all the teaching and skill building that comes with it. Do you feel like you're ready to go if a Big Two opportunity did come your way?
That's it. Thank you for the questions and the comments throughout, Ryan. That's an interesting question. I feel like many years ago, I made some level of peace with myself that I would probably never work for the Big Two. There's a number of reasons behind it. Most of them probably sound like a cop-out. I think primarily it would come down to a point of I don't think my work is good enough for those two companies. You know, whether they are or not, I don't know, because sometimes there's books that I don't read much of the Big Two stuff anymore. It doesn't appeal to me. I don't feel like I'm the audience. I occasionally do, and if I do, I kind of feel like, oh well, they've already got a guy for that, so why would they want me for that? I think the other thing is the element of luck. I'm not in the room with the person who can make the choice that you're the guy to do the thing. Look, whether I finish this current project that I'm on, that becomes a calling card, perhaps, or it could just be the thing that I'm known for doing, the Phantom sort of Vietnam series that'll be collected in a year or two. And if that provides an opportunity to do Big Two work, great. But I feel as though, like, you know, they're a factory. They don't necessarily need me as the cog. They've probably got plenty of other cogs, both you know, in America or overseas, that can do that work for that material. I don't know who to talk to. There've been opportunities. Like I remember sitting in DC Comics office in 2013, I think, or 2013, I think it was, with Chris, and the editor at the time was pulling their hair out because I think the New 52 had just kicked off, and for those that are aware, it was a tenuous time for the company and the creatives working on that series. I heard lots of stories while we were there. Suffice to say that they said that, oh, we'd love to give you something, but I don't have any control of anything right now. And then a couple of months later, that editor was gone. You know, so that was probably the closest I've touched the sun before my wings melted. And it was nice sort of compliments. But I came back to Australia, you know, in 2016, knowing that I had this new thing to do with the Phantom called Kid Phantom. that I thought it was funny that I was flying halfway across the world to try to find potential work, but already, had possibly a job back in Australia doing something. But I never felt comfortable with that work or with my comic drawing until the end of that series anyway. I feel like the work that I'm doing now is fun and at least mentally fulfilling for me. I've got free reign to do what I like, and have so with Fru for a long time now, which is great. And I feel like I would be giving up a lot, to work on something over there. But again, I don't feel as though I have that opportunity or will have that opportunity to ever do that stuff. So it's a kind of a long, stupid answer to Ryan's question. If the opportunity ever arise to do something, sure. I don't know how my deadline ability would go now that I'm not on deadline with Phantom stuff. It's when I can do it in my schedule, that I just do the work and fill gaps. Especially doing like the primary aspect is the graphic novel or the collected work. So there's no sort of hard pressed deadline apart from, certain other factors that are just kind of there in life. But I don't know. It's something that I've kind of given up on years ago, knowing that maybe that's just something that it doesn't really appeal to me anymore. I probably have a Punisher story or two, but that's about it. It's just whatever. Work is work. It's a weird thing. There's this, Australians have always had this going back to the turn of the century of, turn of the 1900s, and particularly when I was writing a book chapter for an American academic book on war comics. And one of the things that came up was this, which if people have read like the old panel by panel John Ryan books or even Sunbeams to Sunset, Nat Carmichael's Comics Oz book by Graham Cliff, they talk about these early kind of boys magazines that came out in the early 1900s. And even then, the boys magazines were emulating and playing up our tenuous sort of connection with the US, as well as, our loyalty to the UK. And I feel like in our culture, that's a constant of, we don't care about you unless someone else overseas cares about you, and then we care about you. So regardless of how good you might be or what you do in Australia, there's like this, it's like Don Lane. Do you remember Don Lane, the old American?
Lane?
Yeah, so he built a career out here hosting an Australian show, probably because he was a tall American guy with American accent. What else could he have a career overseas? I don't know. You know what I mean? Like there's that kind of aspect to it that I feel is inherent in our culture in a way. I don't particularly mind too much if my career is just Australian comics, because I love Australian comics. I love doing Gestalt stuff. I'm slow with Flock, but my focus has been on finishing this Phantom work while I have it. It's been a rough few years and trying to juggle it around, the university job and looking after family and doing that sort of stuff. But if you really want to do something, you'll find a way to do it. Is always my attitude to things. So even if most of my comics are done in, once everyone's gone to bed, and I have a couple of hours to, I try not to sacrifice sleep so much. And again, it comes back to what you were saying earlier about mental health. It's something that I
Yep.
teach my students. The ability of what you can do is only 50%, because if your mind and your body aren't simpatico in the sort of art that you're trying to achieve, then what good is the ability to be able to draw if your mental health and your physical body won't allow you to? So you got to at some point, and I learnt that the hard way. So it's so if Marvel and DC knock, sure, I'm not stupid. I'll probably consider it. I just don't. It's just not realistic to me that they would. So I'm just going to focus on what I have and what I can do.
And do the best work you can. That's
absolutely.
I can, man. When you said, like that, you could see yourself doing a couple of issues of the Punisher. Like when you said that, I was like, yeah, I could. In my mind, I was like, yeah, I can see you doing a couple of issues of the Punisher. Like that'd be very cool. Like you would suit that 100%. Man, I pick up Phantom books because obviously not just yourself, but there's Jason Paulos and Glenn Lumsden and varying other people out there in the community, and people I've met and have things to do with partake in all of that in that through world, and I mean, obviously, I love Australian comic books too, mate. That's my passion. So, on one thing, I'm very much with you that I don't tend to buy much Marvel and DC because, like you, I think those stories for me, I lost interest in them probably in my 20s. Like I just want more from my comic books. I'm not saying that that's less or that I'm not putting anyone in a box. If you love that stuff, you go and buy it and your heart is content. But
I still have old stuff on the shelf, and I still have my Kirby's, and I still have a lot of that material that I bought when I was a kid, and I
got boxes full of the stuff, man, that I love, but I guess
Frank Daredevil and
man,
Black and White up there, and Darwin Cook stuff or Chaykin.
It's so good, man. But I don't know. I just hit a point where I was just, I don't know. I felt like this compulsion for more, something, different. And then, and then I guess, as you grow out, and I don't mean grow in age, I just mean in terms of taste, and you push further out into the fields and you start, what's over here, what's there, what's in this back, and then you realize just there's such rich diversity of stories and comics and, like all sort of art and stuff like that, it's out there. It's beautiful. Because Ryan sent a comment in here, and I'm going to come to you on this, Paul. I'm super pumped to hear we'll be getting a Phantom Vietnam graphic novel because, dude, let's talk about Phantom because I can't see myself ever working on Phantom. All right. So I'm just, I don't know, man. Like, that's just how I see it. We all have our little lanes that we like. You've got your, what you're doing and happy with, but I can't see myself doing Phantom. But I tended to find that I was finding that to me, Phantom was getting, like there's only so many like reprints, and I know there's all licenses and you have to do this, and there's a whole heap of, like litigation process that's in the back too. So you've got to have so many issues printed a year of this, and then you can have that many issues of that. And I get that. But for the average reader, like that just picks up a Phantom like they do on a smoko or, buying a coffee or something like that, man, to see like Paulos's artwork, Lumsden's artwork, but obviously seen your stuff in Eldritch Kid. I'd seen some issues of Kid Phantom. I own some of those. I enjoyed that, and that would have been tricky because, like that sort of work. But man, your Vietnam stuff, dude, like I really caught me off guard because like you just said, you've sort of got an open door for what you want to do. And I think the thing that attracted me to that work in particular, man, was the fact that I'd not seen Phantom portrayed in that way during that era. Like on the war front. I know there's 26 Phantoms or whatever there is, but just that, how you presented it, just struck with me. And I have followed each of your issues since then, and I enjoy them very much. There was also a particular issue that I enjoyed immensely. I can't remember the number of it, but it's the one where Phantom's boxing on the cover, and he has like, man, awesome. Really unique art style, dude. With your art style, because I mean, God, you can pick your art, man, a mile away. Adam Gillespie, Phantom in Vietnam is easily the best Phantom story of recent years. So thank you, Adam.
Thanks.
I obviously, I'm with
coming
you.
just
Mate,
really.
What's for you and your art style? Now you're talking about a whole myriad of people that you're reading, like say, you've mentioned your Millers, your Kirby, like all that sort of stuff. I can see that. Like now that you're talking about, I can see little bits and pieces in your work. But you're very unique to me. I can't really see too much more other than you. So I mean, what was the driving for? Were you always trying to do something quintessentially you? Like, is that one of the things when you're a kid, through all of these trials, lessons, tribulations, the study, the becoming a doctor, in this theoretical process to build to where you are now, was there always that, I want to be Paul Mason? What does Paul Mason equate to, like in my, like career, your art, your voice? Like, was it a conscious effort?
I don't think it was a conscious effort. I just think maybe like style's interesting. I talk about it in at uni because sometimes you have to be a little bit fluid with the approach, and sometimes it's essentially a guess when you're thinking about from a commercial aspect of what is going to sell or what could possibly appeal to a certain audience, which sometimes makes things difficult. And like what I was laughing about earlier when we mentioned Kid Phantom and the sort of initial backlash that I received before the book had even come out. But that's just our culture, I think, in general. It's whether Will Eisner was correct in saying that style was just our sort of errors and failures of trying to achieve a semi-realistic approach and falling short. I don't know. I feel like style is kind of that, whether you seek it or not, is perhaps a conscious, eventually subconscious approach to the influences and the things that you appreciate that just manifest in the way that you
so it's come about more in an intuitive sort of a sense, would you think?
I think so. I think there's an aspect that kind of, whether it's I can see sometimes influences that come out, and I can see where there's elements of shortfalls of trying to replicate or approach a certain aspect of drawing, and it happens to come out in that fashion, and becomes an inherent pattern that, as you draw it, like hands, for instance, I know that, like, my hands are probably Romita Jr.-esque, maybe Jack Kirby-esque, with little sort of cartoony elements thrown in. Because a lot of my influences growing up was television and movies and watching Looney Tunes cartoons and stuff, there's probably a cartoonier approach to a lot of the work that I do. And it's just something that's inherently been there all that time. In some approaches or certain jobs where you have to draw in a certain fashion, I can force myself to do it. But over the course of pages, it would be difficult to maintain. It would be the equivalent of maybe like Ramita Senior's attempt of doing Steve Ditko when Steve Ditko left Spider-Man. That kind of first issue of him trying to do Ditko, but it's not Ditko. You know what I mean? I feel like that those are just elements, and regardless of who sort of laughed at me in school saying, "Oh, your stuff's cartoony," or "It looks like a cartoon," or or people saying that this won't sell. I was sort of, in the end, I was just kind of like, well, it kind of is what it is, and it's something that this appeals. And I know every now and again, if there's like a Toth philosophy or a Goran Parlov-esque element to it that I'm trying to go for, it's more about looking back at my earlier stuff and feeling like I was throwing in too many lines, and I'm of the approach of like, a line should be put down on the page for a reason. Like every mark that you make has a job, and if I can't figure out what the job is of that mark, then it shouldn't necessarily be there. So I'm just trying to figure that process out while trying to replicate some semblance of life or that particular element on the page as correctly and accurately as possible, without it looking too stiff or without it looking like it's not from my pencil or ink pen, so even if it's a replication of a reference material of a real place or a real machine or a real gun or something that I've wanted to bring a sense of authenticity to the story because that's where it's set and that's what I'm trying to do with it. I don't want it to look like I've just looked at a photograph or I've just traced over something. Like I still want it to look like me or my mark that I've made. So that's those are just, I guess, those elements there. And so I look up to artists like an Alex Toth or even like a David Mazzucchelli who is able to be flexible with their art style and approach. And plenty of times people would comment on Mazzucchelli's work and say, oh, he can't draw anymore. It's like, well, no, that's coming from a place of ignorance, of not understanding that those are choices. And so even with Kid Phantom, like, and maybe there's a lot of stuff in the earlier issues that I cringe at now. I know, and I know that maybe by the last issue I was starting to get a little bit comfortable with the character after a while, but by then it was kind of too late. I know that there was choices being made deliberately, and I was thinking about whatever that underlying structure is. So as long as the compositional aspects to the drawing, and as long as the poses were lively, and it was the expression that I was trying to create was achieving their goal, then everything else was kind of like tinsel on the Christmas tree. It's just the decoration. So I'm big on trying to nail those fundamentals and continually working on what the visual storytelling aspect should be. So whatever comes out, but that's all I care about. I've had students hand in storyboards and they could look rough as, but if I can look at the linear motif of them and understand what the composition is or what that particular shot is trying to achieve, then it gets high marks in my book, because you can wrap tinsel and fairy lights around a pile of garbage, but at the end of the day, it's still structurally garbage. So,
yeah, like polishing a dog poo, mate. You know, like
absolutely.
yeah. No, I get that. Hey, no question for you because
Sure.
man, I love
The waffle, by the way. I
loving
just
no, don't you stress about that. This is what chinwags are, man. Like this
okay.
is the chinwag, the fluidity, the talking, like you know, like the learning. I love learning. You know, that's why it's like, you know, the detail that you're going into, coming from like a teacher's mind and stuff like that. Like my mind, I mean, like just my mind is a little bit different. I've tended to find that I look at something and I feel like I've just read so many comics over the years, and I'm not always right. You know what I mean? And sometimes it takes me a lot of pages because I do traditional, and like I just have my own process of I'll do a page and freestyle it, and then happy, and then come back later and redo it. So I'm a bit all over the shop. I'm not like technically minded. It's just my thing I do.
sure.
Um, but do you? I wonder. Just that from me, I tend to find that I'm particularly over the last like 12 months or so, like uh, I have always, and I feel in particular over the last 12 months, I practice meditation. I do that twice a day, and since I've started meditating, I've found that my creativity has become far more intuitive in
Right.
terms of what I've learned previously is still there,
Mm-hmm.
but if I'm vibing and I'm penciling and I get this notion of I don't think it's going to work, there's something inside of me just goes like flow, baby, flow, and I just let it go anyway. You know what I mean? And I think
Yeah.
what you were sort of getting to before is like, if I can read between the lines, is you feel sometimes like the work that you don't like is when you're like forced a little bit. You know what I mean? Like you feel like you're like pushing something as opposed to like rolling on with it. Just now, if I've got this wrong, I apologize. But is that thought process because you're so, I guess, literally, in a literary sense, studied on all of the arts through, you know, your university degrees and your book writing and your teaching, you know, so you obviously know things, you know, like in terms of very detailed. Do you tend to find sometimes that may possibly get in the way of people's artwork? I
Yeah,
hope that
like that like the
crudely,
pursuit of
that's all the answer.
yeah, sure. From what I gather, yeah, I guess sometimes that pursuit of perfection and knowing. Um, sorry, long day. Brain
That's okay.
failing.
It's a weird question, man. I do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I see what you're trying to say. I think sometimes it's just whether I feel like looking back at it. I feel like everybody should be able to look back at their work and try and be honest with themselves as to
yeah.
you know whether it was like I know the only way to get good at any sort of drawing or art is by doing it.
Yeah.
And as Chuck Jones used to say, everyone's got 10,000 crappy drawings in their system. You might as well, you got to do them all to get them out. So. Um, so I felt like at least doing, Kid Phantom, and there was, 300-400 pages of churning that stuff out, that becomes a point where you start to feel more comfortable with it. I don't know whether it's just knowing that knowledge or if it's just me, and my anxieties and hang-ups
Mhm.
and my imposter syndrome, whether I feel like it's not where I want it to be because I know all this stuff, or whether it's because that's just me. It's hard to kind of separate that aspect. It's hard. Like there's always this, like you mentioned it earlier about like you do these things and you notice, you've read a lot of comics and you notice patterns and you kind of, I did security for a number of years. I was a loss prevention officer, and it got to a point where I could be sitting there on cameras or in a shopping mall, and there could be 100 people flowing through at Christmas time, and I could go, see that guy there? Keep an eye on him, because I'm going to go outside at the exit and wait for him because he's about to steal something. And they'll say, how do you know? And it's like, well, I'm not Nostradamus or Professor X or anything. I know I'm balding, but it was more about the fact that you notice patterns in behavior and patterns in the way people move and look and act through repetition. So I know from perhaps looking back at earlier works, that aspect of repetition and then seeing like the older stuff going, well, I can see where that doesn't necessarily align with the knowledge that I've gained or the best practices that have picked up along the way as you learn how to do something and then figure out a better way to do it, because it's...
Well, that obviously had come with the experience. And I mean, like from when you were doing Kid Phantom to where you are now, even the Eldridge Kid, I mean, like, the more you've studied, the more you've practiced, the more knowledge you've learned. And I'm also going to assume, because like there are people that I know that are friends of yours that speak highly of you, that, people, they're people that, like obviously, like you've asked questions of and reached out to like, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And they've given pointers. So the community has, assisted in that regard. And I think I think the rhythms and at that stage, you would have had the frame of reference and the confidence in your artwork to where you are there. And like, that's part of it, isn't it? Like you can go back and look at it and go, man, I've learned from that. I should never have done that, but why don't I try this? And I'm going to bring that forward now. Or you'll get to a point in the new comic where you go, man, I did that in issue 2 of that and I shouldn't have done that. I've got a chance to redeem myself now, and you'll have a crack at it and that. And I mean, that's the whole journey of the artist, man, and the creator, I guess. Because, dude, I can look at a drawing I did yesterday and think it's awful. You know what I mean? Like, and and I don't know, like it's I wasn't asking that question to be a pain. It's just that it's just observational from my perspective, man. Because it's like, I mean, I watch heaps of like YouTube stuff, and I've read comic books and books by authors and stuff, and I'm very well aware, you can pick artists and you can see their styles and their hatching and how they're doing things and all that, but since and I was very I struggled a long time. I don't think it's been probably until the last maybe 2 or 3 years where I've really started to find myself, and weirdly enough, Paul, I think it happened more through sobriety than it did when I was drinking and stuff. Like I was all over the shop, not quite, but sobriety sort of like I found, like I guess a straight line, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And just with this meditation, I've sat down here and drawn like obviously thousands of hours, and I've often wondered, like I wonder if the intuition or just that whole flow thing of like just chance it, man, just have a go. You know what I mean? You can rub it out later. Is the right thing or is the wrong thing? But then I suppose that's a null and void question or statement to an extent, because every creative process is different,
Yeah, but I think there is an inherent level of like, effort and like I should have just sworn and said effort. You know what I mean? Like,
no, you can. You can. Come on.
And just do. And I think what you're saying is cool in a sense of you make a decision of, well, and I think that's like in life in general. And I think it's like there was time where we had some tragedy in the family last year, and we're still sort of trying to come to grips with it and live with it. And for a while there, I lost the ability to kind of care about anything apart from my immediate loved ones and trying to get them through that situation.
Yep.
And it just kind of taught me that sometimes you can have hang-ups about stuff, the way that whether you do it or whatever you're involved in, and you can get like really sort of crazy and idiosyncratic about something that really at the end of the day doesn't matter, you know, because life is too short. So in the sense of like trying new things and doing new things, whether you feel like it's the right way to do something or you're not necessarily sure whether it's the right or the wrong way, I feel like you just have to do it. Like you have to push beyond that level of doubt and just go like, fuck it. And just, you know, and it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, where it's like, well, it's done because I feel like you have to finish something in order to solidify the lessons of that thing. You know, plenty of people, you know, and I talk to students as well about this. They get partway through a project and something more enticing comes along, or they lose interest, or they get self-doubt, or something impacts them, and they make that decision of like, I'm just going to let it go because it's easier. It feels easier to do that. Whereas, and I don't feel like you learn anything from that. Like all you're doing is putting it on pause. And then it's not until you finish something, whether you were successful or not successful with it, or whether you felt like you learnt the lessons from it or not, regardless, at least you finished it. It's done. And then as you go through the process of doing something similar or doing something else or doing it all over again, at least you come at it with the lessons of what you learnt from the previous flow of doing that. But if you're always putting it on pause or running away from it or quitting from it, then I don't feel like you learn anything from doing that. And as I said earlier, you feel like you're taking the easy approach, but really you're taking the hard approach because it's taking you longer to learn those lessons from completing that task. And you in a sense, you know, it's easier to push through and do the thing rather than give up, because then you've got to live with that for, you know, the rest of your life, that you've given up on that thing. So anyway, I'm probably not making much sense at this point, but yeah.
No, you are. Well, to be honest with you, mate, Sean, she just said getting distracted by a shiny new project. Never, you know. So I think everyone's been guilty of that.
Oh, look,
Dude, I mean, I would like to say though, on a note, like you just suggested that you weren't making much sense then. Yet to me, what you were just talking about absolutely 100% did resonate, because just in terms of I've had my own thoughts about just look, you know, we all have our, again, like I'm very honest on this show about how I feel. I like it that way. You know, like to be as authentic as I can. And I have doubts constantly, man. I wonder why I'm doing this. I wonder why I'm sitting down here in this room for like hundreds of hours a month, you know, like doing this sort of stuff. And many, many times, you know, like I've often thought, you know what, man, it's too hard. I'm like, you know, like I got, you know, there's better things to do in life. You know what I mean? Like I could be out climbing mountains and stuff like that. But the one mountain you can't climb is giving up on stuff, man, because you're 100% right. Like it builds up on you if you set those goals and you don't achieve them. And yeah, no, so it does resonate. And it's very strange that on these chinwags, Paul,
yes.
I always learn something that just sticks with me from who, no matter who it is, man, you know, like, and amongst
I've
many
listened to a
things,
few.
you know, like, yeah, it's just, I just had those, you know, like basically for me is like, you know, I got my own independent comic book coming out soon, and it's been like 2.5 years of a battle through sobriety and trying to relearn artwork and, like, just the whole battle, man. Do you know what I mean? To get this thing done. And I was like sitting there last night and this morning in particular, like, while extremely proud of myself that I'd accomplished this little, like, step.
That's great.
I also felt a moment of, man, do I really want to do another one? You know what I mean? Because it was such a bloody battle to get this
I
one done.
understand.
So, yeah,
And
so that's why when you were talking then, man, like, in a strange way, you answered the question, because it's like that's what my intuition is saying is, Lee, you're an idiot. Like, you have to do the next one, like, you know.
I've always thought that comics, like on a certain level, you have to love it because, it's not like it's paying us a fortune, right? So that's a
Yeah,
start. It's not the
yeah,
easiest medium to do. Like, look, you can approach a comic no matter how much you do, but let's say from a commercial standpoint or trying to maintain an audience, it's not the easiest thing to do. There's so much that you've got to learn to execute the craft as to the best of your abilities. And, we've talked about that stuff before. But on a certain level, like, I know for me, I love the medium and I just want to tell stories in that medium. Um, and I think sometimes society is, in particular in recent years, is kind of geared towards that idea of, if you're not doing something that's going to, turn a profit or make you money in some way, shape, or form, then it doesn't have validity. And I think that's nonsense. Like, I think all art forms and all aspects of, culture of what we do, they add to the culture. There's an importance to it. Regardless of what some dude in a suit at the top tells you. So, I don't think that, like, I think sometimes the question of what am I doing, or there's better things to do than what I should be doing. Like, obviously, if comics were easy, then there'd be more people doing them, and maybe less people on TikTok, perhaps, or whatever. I couldn't come up with a reason or anything else, but you know what I'm saying? Like, killing time in some other fashion.
yeah,
I feel like it is an expression of ourselves, or at least the better ones are. Particularly, even if we're talking from a commercial standpoint, the better ones have an aspect to them that speaks to the creators that made that material. They're trying to, whether they're trying to say something or whether they're just trying to express something. I think there's a beautifulness to it, or a validity to it. But yeah, like in terms of making it a choice of what we do, I really think it comes down to what you want to do. Sometimes we have those elements of self-doubt, and we have those elements of what will people think, and these are all natural occurrences of the artist that has, a combination of a massive ego and a fragile small little ego that we're constantly fighting with. And I tell my students when they're making their third year sort of graduation films, that at some point during a project, it is a hard slog. You will doubt yourself, and you will doubt the work that you are doing and whether it has any validity or whatever that process might be. I say that when it comes to comics or any sort of creativity or expression, you have to trust yourself and what you're trying to do, what you're trying to say. Do it because you enjoy it, because life is too short. And if you're really finding that everything is a slog, like, why do it? I also say to people that when it comes to, any sort of work or toil, I used to point at construction workers outside and say, those guys on smoko aren't going to be skipping merrily back to that hole that they just dug, or that wall that they're in the middle of building, to go, back to the wall. You know what I mean? And there's going to be some aspects of the job that are going to be a slog, and when it gets difficult like that, understand that there might be other sort of external factors going on in life, or maybe from a mental health standpoint or whatever, that might be just a simple case of go and have a glass of water, get some sunshine, do a little exercise, and come back to it later. And if you still feel the way that you feel, then yeah, sure, put the pencil down. But like, by all means, keep building that wall, like keep pushing forward. Because like we said earlier, like, Teddy Atlas, the famous boxing trainer, used to say that it's harder to live with a sense of giving up, or a sense of defeat. It might seem easier at the time while you're in the middle of a fight to go, I'm just going to put my arms down and catch one on the chin and lie down. And then it's over. I don't have to deal with it anymore. But maybe pushing through that difficulty of the next few rounds beats a lifetime of living with that easy knockdown and get out of the ring sort of aspect, like we were saying earlier. So.
Yeah. See, the beautiful thing is too, and thanks for Alison and all the other comments just then about the appreciation of things. Thank you, man. I love the fact that like we were talking about in our first segment, like earlier, like how sports and physical activity can be applied to aspects of life too, with you giving that analogy, because you're exactly right, mate. You can lower your gloves and take the hit. It'd be the easy way out and take the quick cash, you know what I mean? But like there's nothing quite like getting to that point, mate, where you put so much in that you might lose, but you're sick from the effort, and you're knackered, and your legs are wobbly, and you're giving it everything you got, you know what I mean? And like it, you might not have won the medal, but you can stand up tall, like shoulder to shoulder with
What was one of my favorite movies, Rocky, right? What was that about? Like, everyone goes, oh, Rocky, and they think like Fight the Russian and the action movie, Mr. T and Pity the Fool and all that sort of stuff. But on one hand, it was a romance movie, but on the other hand, like, Rocky's main thing of what he wanted to achieve, like his hero's journey, was just going the distance.
Yep.
Like, it wasn't, I'm gonna beat Apollo and then he fails. Like, if you notice in the original movie, they didn't dwell on the fact that they were raising Apollo's hand at the end of the film. Like, that was an afterthought. The triumphant music was the fact that he survived. And Adrian comes into the ring, and the first thing he says to her is, "Hey, where's your hat?" And that
yeah. Well, mate, I watched Rocky not too long back.
Yeah.
One of the it is actually, that's one of those films that like, it has been seen so many times by so many people that when you haven't witnessed it for a while, and you can pull yourself away from the iconography of it, and then you go back and you just catch it, and you're in that zone, and you watch it, it's an awesome film all way around, man. Talented dude, that Sylvester Stallone, when he was younger. I mean, I read a film book once, like derailing here for a sec, but a little bit of weird trivia.
I like this. It's pretty much me. Yeah, go on.
Man, Sylvester Stallone in a 1981 film book. Like, I can't remember the name of the film book, but it was a Hollywood thing, up and comers and that. He was touted as being like one of the up and coming like directors to watch, man, over like the next few years. They'd seen him as being a director, and then he obviously went on to be an action hero, and with a little bit of directing. But like, good on him. He's a good screenwriter. Pretty sure he did. I'm not sure. You may know this, but my memory's a little bit. I'm pretty sure he wrote Saturday Night Fever, or if it wasn't Saturday Night Fever, it was another Urban Cowboy. It was one of those John Travolta movies.
Yeah, he directed the sequel. Yeah, he directed. I think it was called Staying Alive, and put Travolta on the same kind of regiment that he did for his Rambo. Would have been part 2 at the time. That kind of cut. Didn't do too well. They don't really talk about that.
But interesting that, like, that's another one of those things. I guess, man, he wanted to do it, and like, I'm going to do it, and like they had fun doing it. Maybe might not stand the test of time, but it's done. People out there. Because the other thing is too, it's like a song you hear, and you may not like that song, but someone else out there is going to love it. So I guess it's personal people's opinions and stuff. That's what it is. That's the world, man. It's all full of opinions at the moment. And I think, sometimes, like you were saying, you just got to follow the joy, mate, and not worry too much about what everyone else's thoughts are on your work, because there's a great joy in just getting it completed. And then once it's out into the universe, man, there's no control over that, like it's some things hit, some things miss, man, some things.
You can't control what people like or do or say. I like the attitude of, there's been actors in time, or even like Ditko being asked, like, what's your favorite comic book that you worked on? And he's like, oh, the next one, and there's actors that talk about that too. Like, what was the favorite role that you did? The next one. And that's, I resonate with that. I like that.
Yeah, I think that is cool, man, because you always got to keep, like, it's sort of like that whole, the past is gone, you can take memories, you live in the present, but you always keep an eye on the future to know where you're going. So it's like you can make your improvements and pick your path as to where you want to go and things like that. It's we haven't spoken this evening, and I know I do want to talk to you about this, is Flock. So what's because that's a, I'd say, celebrated comic book around. You won some awards and all that when that came out, like a couple of years back, and many people have such a great appreciation for it. And now knowing that you and I both share a love of our feathered like fauna, where did Flock come from? What was the gestation of that, man?
Oh, thanks for the comments. I only sort of heard recently that people were like, when's the next one coming out? So I was like, oh, people actually liked it. Okay, cool. So that's really nice to hear. There was a task that I used to give art direction students. We did in animation, you've got different majors that you can undertake. And the concept art students had a 3rd year art direction class specifically that I helped rewrite and taught for many years. This year was the first year I didn't have the opportunity to teach it in like 8 or 9 years. Just dropping stuff off my desk. But I used to do this task where I wanted to kind of combine elements of, when students do life drawing and then they go off and they do their assignments in the lab and their own sort of digital work, they separate it. Like, so they conduct their life drawing sessions in the life drawing studio, and then the rules, tools, and the techniques that they may develop there don't necessarily translate into their particular work. And I get it. Sometimes people have their comfort zone of what they like to draw, and they've got their go-to poses or go-to characters or go-to heads or things that they like to draw. It's like their reps, it's like that kid in high school that can draw that one thing really well, so they just do that over and over.
Yeah. I think I'm still doing that. I just hide lots of smoke.
Yeah.
Strict pony, mate.
It's good for Mignola. It's good for all of us.
Yeah.
So anyway, so there was an exercise of what I'd do is I'd we go and we draw some poses from the life drawing studio. Then I drag them to the museum down the road and we draw and sketch animals. And then I drag them into the lab and I'd say, all right, well, you've drawn some stuff from the museum, you've drawn some stuff in the lab. I want you to kind of photo bash some of that stuff together of your own sketches, do some digital work, take the traditional stuff, do some digital creation and come up with some sort of creature design. And as an example in class, I had just been in the museum, and while the kids were looking at certain animals, I sketched a few pigeons and things, and I went down into the where the Mephisto tank is in Brisbane. They've got the World War One tank that they confiscated from a northern France battlefield in World War One. And they had like World War One sort of light horseman uniforms on display and stuff like that. So I did some extra sketches while I was there. So while I was in class, hey, look, you got to develop. I'm just answering the comment here. You got to develop some sort of shorthand, otherwise you'll be there all day. So whatever trees you got, go for it. I'm just saying, put in some variety every now and again of different trees. When I'd plug in my iPad, and on the big screen, I was just doing a mash of like some of the uniform sketches and the pigeon sketch, and I just drew this kind of 6-foot man pigeon wearing a World War One army uniform, and that was sort of the character that I come up with. This crested pigeon, an Aussie native pigeon, wearing this uniform. And then when the pandemic hit, and all my Fru work dried up, it was pencils down. And after about a month of going through grief symptoms, I dragged myself up and decided, well, I need something to keep my brain occupied. I mean, I haven't drawn my own or written or drawn my own comic in a number of years. I did Eldritch Kid, I did Kid Phantoms. It'd been ages since I've done Soldier Legacy, but I had this dumb idea of wanting to draw this or write a story around this sort of man pigeon character, or war pidge as I sort of dubbed him. So I'd also just before the pandemic hit, I'd also been to Lifeline Book Fair, and I'd picked up a stack of cheap Army, Vietnam, and World War II picture books that I was hoping to use for the continuation of my NAM series that all of a sudden dried up. Yeah. And I thought, what was I going to do with all this material that I just bought? I like drawing war stuff. Not because I like battles and guns and war. I actually, in the Phantom comic, I shy away from doing it because I figured if you want to watch a war movie, you could watch one. Everyone's seen Apocalypse Now or whatever. What's the point of drawing Apocalypse Now? Do something different. But war offers natural conflict. And what resonates is not like what battalion did what on what day, but how did this affect the people that kind of live there? Hey, puppy.
That's Lloyd. He likes the camera more than me, man. So
yeah, Lloyd, I'm the same.
Yeah, he's a good fella.
So I decided that I wanted to use some of this material, and I came up with this really dumb story. Like I've written the whole thing. It's all written, plotted out. And I wanted to involve my birds and the birds that have been part of our lives as potential characters in this kind of dumb story about this old soldier talking about his time in all these conflicts. And and part of it, my partner, and it was basically just to entertain Amanda. Part of like Amanda was sort of spitballing ideas and said to me, because I wanted to do, she goes, oh, you should touch on the Emu War. And I'm like, at first I was like, I don't know how that would work. And then sat down and thought about it and go, oh yeah, I can see how this works after sort of doing my research and then connecting the dots in regards to all this stuff that was going on in Australia at the time. So there's historical elements to it that all kind of fit within the nonsense that I'm weaving with this kind of, I don't know, sci-fi, war, dumb, anthropomorphic thing that became book.
It's lovely creativity, man. Like from what I can see, it's. I like the fact that you've taken into consideration that your animals, past and present, are also like incorporated into it as the main characters, man. Because another thing that's that you and I have in common is through the previous issues of my comic book is I incorporate my previous dogs and dogs in the background and stuff like that at different sections, man. So it's either that's why I like Chinwags, man. These little things you find out about people that are like, man, I could sort of do that, like and doing your thing. But no, it's I think like from what I can see, man, I think there's quite a lot of people that are like super keen on the next flock coming out. But I mean, God, mate, you're busy. You got your Vietnam, Phantom thing that you like head down on, which, man, I really want to see that get done because it's like it broke away too. And I want to give you kudos here, like. The Phantom fell into, like, for me, with so many reprints, there's a traditional aspect of it that's certain. I would think that older readers are expecting from the Phantom. And what I liked particularly about your Phantom, and I did like about Jason's Paulos's Phantom and Glenn's, is it was different. It was fresh. It was like, it was a bit like it was new. It was something like it. Paul Mason's Phantom is Paul Mason's Phantom. Jason Paulos's is Jason Paulos's. And I liked that, man. I thought it invigorated it with a little bit of life.
Very much.
Yeah. So
I as much as I love the character of the Phantom and the lore behind it, I know that again, it's like I was saying about those Vietnam War movies, like they're already made. So what would it serve me to do those stories again? Like I've written, I wrote that sequel, the boxing story you mentioned. That was a sequel to a classic story.
Yep.
But I did it with my approach. But I still like looked at the sequel and tried to find, like, there was a big gaping plot hole in it that I wanted to sort of touch on. And I have written another extended story that connects in with that I hope I get the opportunity one day, perhaps after the NAM stuff, to do. But if I don't, I'll just release that plot elsewhere, I guess. And then I'm also having fun with Amanda, where we plotted an old Julie Walker female Phantom story that's, again, a different take on the character, where it's in outback Australia in the early 1900s, sort of a meat pie Western type story that you don't ordinarily see, particularly with Julie Walker, who's now an old woman, a bitter old woman, who's just going around smoking pirates and killing bushrangers. And there's a couple of things in the last part that I'm drawing right now that I've never really heard much from King Features, other than the first time I did. I wrote and drew that first NAM story, that full-length story, back in early, I think it came out at early 2019 in the annual. Like, I heard from King Features, there was one or two words that they wanted me to change, but they also said that this was they really appreciated the way that I treated the Phantom in that story, and that's what they wanted to see from sort of modern stuff. So I kind of dug that. But there's a moment in this next Julie Walker story that I'm wondering if King Features might not like, but given the context of her being I don't know if you saw Terminator Dark Fate. It was with
Is that the one James Cameron came back and it had that Ghost Rider dude playing Terminator? Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah, and they had Sarah Connor was an old sort of Terminator hunting woman. That was the take. That was the take we had him. Well, that Amanda said we should do Julie Walker like that, and I went, yes,
that's cool.
Okay, so she's a very bitter character in that regard, and there's a couple of things that I'm wondering if King Features will push back, but otherwise, we'll see what happens.
Well, better to beg forgiveness and ask permission and creativity, I suppose, Paul. So you'll find out with a strongly worded email, I'm sure.
But yes, I understand that there are certain fans that like their material classic, regardless of what I do, and that's okay, because I know that there's certain people that do like the take of what I'm doing, and some people ask why would Vietnam have relevance to what's sort of in general, and I'm like, well, two things. One is, who cares? Why would it have to be relevant right now? Because I'm just enjoying doing it. But also it does have relevance because there's a lot of things about that time period that seem that whether it's politics or the world that we live in are doomed to repeat themselves. So I remember a couple of years ago sitting with Dudley after a Phantom dinner. Dudley's the publisher at the moment with Fruit. He's been publisher for many years now, after Jim Shepard passed away.
Yep.
And Dudley said to me, do you see the Phantom, in the kind of the Russian-UK conflict? This was, as I said, a few years ago. And I said, no, but I know how you can address it. And I said, I know where the Vietnam story is ending. And I basically pitched that last story. And when I was finished, he said, do whatever you got to do to get to that story. Because that's really great, just whatever. And that's the lovely thing I've had with Fru, where I just, here's the new chapter to Vietnam, send, and that's it. And that's the conversation. So, and then I'll do the next one. And knowing that I know that I'm not going to repeat myself in each story, I find something unique about whatever was going on in that conflict or within that aspect of the conflict where I've set the continuity of that Phantom in that part of the story. So and I just want them to be, even if they touch on characters that have existed in Lee Falk's world, and I want it to make sense within the context of their first appearance in whatever story I've pulled them from. I'll give you a preview. I handed in a story recently. If you remember that boxing story that I did,
I do.
I was filling a gap in the original Mass Marvel story from 1948, but there was a main character in that original story that I didn't touch. But I found an angle to bring them back and continue their story in a chapter in the Vietnam tale. So in a way, it kind of ties in with the boxing story as well as Lee Falk's lore. But if you've never read any of that stuff, it doesn't matter anyway, because it's a self-contained little 10-page story that hopefully someone will dig.
Yeah, but it's still cool that you've put that much thought and love into it, man, because that's the sort of creativity and detail that I enjoy, because it's like a lot of people may miss that, but there will be people out there that will see and recognize those Easter eggs, I guess you call them. And
sure.
and attachments, like to those characters, and go like, man, like look at this dude go, you know what I mean? Like he knows his phantom lore, like who these, like who these characters are. But I reckon it's cool, man, that like you've just sort of got your own little section, I guess, of Phantom that like you've got your little, like the Vietnam thing, like I would assume is like very synonymous with you now with Phantom, and you're building your own story and bringing characters in as you want. So it's like you do have your own lane with it, like which is really cool. Yeah, yeah. I,
Yeah,
I do,
yeah,
I do like Phantom. He's a cool looking dude, and I like the way you do vehicles and buildings too, because it's like what they, like you were saying earlier, you know what they are, and they're drawn by you, but they're not photo representations of things. And I also like comic books that you know what something is, but it's not a carbon copy. Or man, we may as well be taking photographs, like I'm putting them on the background and draw a comic book on
yeah.
top. Like
Those would just be those Italian Fermenti
yeah,
comics.
yeah. Yeah, I'm with you. I don't see the point of that. Like, give it your own flair. It's like, don't call it a car if it's got one wheel, but you know what I'm saying. It's like, but yeah. No, that's beautiful, man. All right. Well, Paul, as we wind down our show this evening, mate, and we sort of, we've got comment backlog time. We've got a giant box. So here we go. I've never seen that before, Paul. So ready yourself, mate.
That's
All
okay.
right. Monche, I love when people take a recognizable IP and tell a unique story rather than just reboot the origin story again.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, it's hard. I get the fact that reboots are a thing now, and I suppose it's because sometimes the origin is the best story that they can tell. So I kind of, and I know that they're trying to hook new audiences and sometimes, so I kind of get that. But the Phantom's kind of simple. You can do his origin in a page, and I just wanted to do something a bit different. So I appreciate that comment. Thank you.
Cool, eh? It's like, look at you go. You'll be back on drawing Phantom tomorrow, mate. All right, we got Clampshell. The haters hated what they couldn't understand. Kid Phantom is a refreshing take on the Phantom, and I mean, mate, I would say from everything you've said about Kid Phantom tonight too, from my memory when it came out, again, I would assume it was the traditionalists that probably weren't really happy about, Phantom's not a kid, like that sort of thing. We want our Phantom back. So, I applaud yourself and the creative team and the editor for, like having the the bits to, like have a go at it, mate, at the end of the day. So.
I mean, it was originally a pitch that Glenn had already made, but there was one sort of visual that I was sort of given, but otherwise I had free reign and I made some choices. And, there was plenty of kids out there that enjoyed it and plenty that had never read comics before that this was their first comic and got them into the Phantom or the character. So as far as I was concerned, mission accomplished. Whether King Features decided after a while that they wanted to do their own thing that never eventuated, that's on them. And sometimes they have different ideas of what they want to do with certain properties that kind of don't always pan out. But for a while there, it was something different, and we tried a new thing. I had someone sort of complaining, he was an ugly little kid with freckles and looked a bit gangly, and I'm like, yeah, but like that's what puppies look like before they grow into huskies. You know what I mean? Like if the hero looks perfect and is perfect as a kid, what's the point reading it? Like, prequels. I've never really been a fan of prequels because it feels like if that was the best story to tell, they would have told it first. So, like with Phantom's case, to give him some sort of character arc into becoming the character that we all know, he has to go through some sort of mental and physical development. Otherwise, why read it? It just feels like if I could with any comic script, rub out the name of the character and just change the character's name, and it doesn't matter in regards to the plot or the storyline, then I feel like as a writer I've kind of failed in that regard. It has to be unique to that character and what they're going through in some way, shape, or form. Like whether it's my own the Vietnam stuff, or whether it's Flock, or when Amanda and I plotted Fury, or even the Australian comic hero stuff that Amanda and I have been writing for Fru that I hope gets released one day. Like we write it to tailor it towards that character and what we know about who they are, and if there's not much there in regards to who they are, we try to explore what we do have into extrapolating into some sort of dimension for that character to go through their journey. Otherwise, it's just this dude does this thing and then the comic ends. That's not fun.
Yeah, no, I like it, man. I like the fact too that Amanda helps you, mate, and you're like a little creative team and stuff like that going on, man. You know, I think that's a beautiful thing.
She's good at reining in my, like, I'll do a Vietnam story, and sometimes the first time she sees it is like the first draft letters, like the lettering's done, the pages are done, the art's done, and I hand it to her and I say, like, away you go, and she'll read it, and if I've been a bit like verbose, or maybe I've learnt so much about a topic that I'm trying to squeeze in little facts. Like she'll read it and go, I feel like this is taking me away from the story, and her instincts are usually right. I go, you know what, you're right. I just sound like a smart ass, and it's not up to me to teach an audience. It's just to entertain them. So regardless of how many hours I've listened to, something about the Cambodian Civil War, if all that kind of comes from that is my affirmation that the Khmer Rouge were awful people, that'll do. I don't have to fill the text box more of junk that the reader isn't going to care about. No one's going to love something as much as I do, so I have to kind of let it go in that sense and just tell the story that I'm trying to tell without inhibiting it too much. So she's good. She's good like that. And in regards to, if I'm working more directly on a story, it's usually because she has a take on it, or I'm not a small woman, so I can't think necessarily like that small woman, so
I'm just laughing at the fact that you well,
well, you know what I mean. Like
exactly what you mean.
There's a character that we're writing for Fru that we're asked to pitch a while ago that for another artist, and there's aspect to that character that from a mindset of Amanda's experiences, I need to say to her, can you read over this dialogue and these elements to the story? Does this ring true? Does this make sense? So if I'm, even with the Nam story, if I'm telling the story from a perspective of a middle-aged North Vietnamese Viet Cong woman, and her motivations for why she joined the VC in the first place, like, I don't know, but I have to read and the interviews with people like that and try to get in the mindset of what this character is going through and how might they approach a particular situation, so that it rings true and I'm not just shoehorning them into my own plot for my own devices. So
that sounds like you're doing some acting techniques as well there, man, in your writing. Like what I was chuckling at, Paul, was not your answer. Was just that statement you made, because in my mind when you made it, I thought, imagine if that was a reel that just popped up on the Comex site that had you go, I'm not a little lady, like that like I just was. That's what made me giggle.
Probably be cancelled, I'm sure, if I said something.
No, like hey, you never know, mate. We might find out one day. But all right, mate. We got another one, Sean. Yeah, it's not how pretty the art is; it's how well it tells the story. Yes,
100%. 100%. Even though I noticed that like a lot of comics can be purchased and loved because of how pretty they are, you know, and that's fine. There's an audience for that. Like there's people that like artists that I don't, you know, and you'd be the same. Like there's plenty, like there's things in 90s comics that I go, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
there's plenty of things in 90s comics, man, that I go about. But
yeah,
hey,
yeah,
but,
yeah.
like we were saying before, man, you know, like it just because you or I might dislike it, other people do, and that's the beauty of art, mate. It's
Sure.
your own interpretation and your own subjectivity of what you like and that sort of thing. I mean, everyone
Yeah,
in the world was the same, it'd be a boring place. So
that's right. But I guess going back to the Sean Chase comment, the comics that I'm gravitate towards are the ones that aim to do that strong storytelling. So yeah, I dig it.
Yeah. Hence your love of like Frank Miller, etc., that you were talking about
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah.
All right, we got Ryan O'Connor, mate. Next up, so you should have been here for Paul Bedford's Chinwag. Paul, there you go.
Yep.
It was part comics talk, part philosophical deep dive into life's mysteries.
That's Paul all over. Yeah, I've known Paul.
Yeah, Paul's cool dude, man. I like Paul.
He's a nice fella. I haven't seen him in many years, but I remember early days when he brought out the list, and yeah, he's a thinker. So
he is a thinker, man, and that's what I enjoyed that Chinwag too, because I appreciated the openness from Paul and the many things that he was willing to discuss, and it was a very at times a little confronting, I'm sure, for some people out there, but truly honest and heartfelt conversation, I thought, and I enjoyed it very much, man. And
we're all fighting our wars, and that's why I'm always like, you know, you just got to be kind because you don't know what people are sort of going through, you know. So
man, 100%, man. Like it's truer words never been spoken, mate. Kindness never costs a thing, man. You know what I mean? Like, and a little patience and compassion with people. Like just being emotionally aware that that other person may be going through some stuff. Hopefully, I wish there were more emotionally aware and intelligent people out there. So
more people need to do some sort of therapy for sure, like just to even learn the tools of self-care and self management. You know, maybe it's something that should have been in high schools, perhaps. Although who knows if I would have been socially mature to kind of process it, let alone another teenager or something. But anyway, it is what it is. But yeah.
At least these subjects seem to be more openly approached now, mate, as opposed to like when we were younger and not so openly approached.
Yeah, it is getting there. I feel like society still has a long way to go. Just sort of witnessing what my family, Amanda, what she goes through. But it's absolutely. Things are changing, and you've got to be open to what's happening around you, because at the end of the day, the way people carry on, it's like other people's lives affect them in some way, shape, or form, where things that they have an issue about might not affect them at all, but it's the culture of wanting to be outraged about something or upset about something. And it's like, how does that affect your day to day? Is that like literally slapping food out of your mouth or kicking you out of your house?
Man, I think sometimes people just think being intrusive into the way other people want to live their lives is a necessary way that, I don't know, it's like they like to be busy, or it's like they, like, I think if more people just focused inward and focused on themselves and just got themselves right, and as long as other people are happy and peaceful and calm and kind and doing their own thing, And that's really that all should matter, man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, but I don't understand why this person's got an opinion on them, that person's got an opinion on them. Where, you know, if you turn, you know, like the lens the other way, it's like, man, you're the one giving an opinion. You ain't got your shit together, man. You know, like, so.
I think sometimes it's easier for people to look externally and try to fix somebody else before they try to fix it themselves. Sometimes people don't necessarily have those hardships that someone else has gone through, so they don't, you know, whether it's something in their wiring that makes them apathetic, or maybe it's an agenda that they have in order to get somewhere or sell something. Uh, who knows? But it could be a combination of all those things. But you know,
Combination, mate. I'd say it's like, but you know, all we can do, Paul, is keep being, you know, like keep trying to win the war for love, mate. So it's like and push forward, you know, like with that. So you know, the more of us that do it, the more it spreads like a ripple, mate. You know, and then it'll get bigger and bigger if people follow it through. So yeah. Now, man, Clamshell is sent in. Paul is a legit legend amongst the people he's taught. Nothing but love from his students, past and present. So
that's
there
nice.
you go. I was just going to say to you before, I'm so glad that just triggered me into remembering when you were talking about Kid Phantom and you said a comment about, you know, kids enjoyed it and, you know, got some, and it brought kids into reading comic books, man. Hope one day that while you're teaching, you get one kid or, you know, a young individual student walk up to you and go, you know what? Man, it was your Kid Phantom, you know, like that, you know, like got me into all this. Hey, you know, like I hope that happens for you, man, because I reckon that.
Nice. I mean, Aussie comics is like there is an invisible aspect to it sometimes in terms of how it's digested and where it can be sought. You know, I've had a student say to me once that I came to the college to learn and just to do your course or whatever, which was nice. And they were already making comics and doing good things, so that was nice of them. And you know, it was nice of Clamshell there to say that. I know that not every, you know, it's hard. Human nature. You focus on the negatives. And particularly myself, I tend to focus on the negatives. So I know that out of, you know, a classroom full of people, if one person has a problem, whether I've given them feedback that didn't placate them, or whether I misunderstood whatever they were doing, or whether they just had a chip on their shoulder, or I didn't help them that day because they felt that whatever their problem was, I didn't have the solution. You know, not everybody's going to be pleased, and I tend to kind of get fixated on the people that might have a personal comment or attack to sort of say about what I do, or, you know, I've had a couple of horrible sort of student feedback years ago comments that, you know, in hindsight, I know that they were probably bitter about where they were at and what they were doing. But it still hurts nevertheless, and you sort of keep it in the back of your mind. So, and it makes you a little bit gun shy about feedback in general. But it's always a nice surprise when people appreciate what you're trying to do, particularly when there is sort of hardships or life impacting in some way, shape, or form, and you're just trying to survive. You know, but at the same time, be passionate about the work that you do and try to pass off what you love and what you appreciate about, you know, whether animation or art or filmmaking or storytelling, regardless of whatever the parameters are surrounding your own work, your own perceived hang-ups or whatever, where you are situated in the ladder of life, and those impacts that you might be receiving in regards to that, you know. So I kind of, it's always nice to hear that sort of stuff anyway. So.
Yeah, no, it's good, mate. I'm glad you got that out from a comment there, because you know, like I also appreciate the fact that you're being very honest and open here tonight too, mate. Because you know, like you're a teacher, you're a Phantom artist, you know, like Gestalt, you know, like you're successful, very successful in the Australian comic scene, man, and like and
Whatever that
community.
means.
And there's, well, again, success to me, you're working, you're busy, you're a teacher, you're a family man, like a husband, like father of like many feathered animals and things, you know what I mean? So you're busy, like you're a martial artist, like, so you're doing lots of stuff, mate. And to me, that's a success of full life. And like looking at how just like humble you are about having your own certain reservation and insecurities about certain things tonight gives a lot of hope for people out there that are feeling insecurities, to know that people like yourself, mate, of a of that echelon of creator and things feel to a certain extent that way too. But you've managed to do your best to push through and just keep on plugging away, man. So I find that really inspirational. So
thanks, Lee. Yeah, it's probably just spite. You just fueled
well,
on.
man, whatever drives you, mate. Like, because sometimes, sometimes anger is the best fuel too, mate. You turn anger into determination, and you just keep pumping those wheels, man. Like that's what I reckon. So I think that's what happened to me, dude. I gave up on the anger and just I won't let them get. But no, man, appreciate that. It's really cool. Now, Sean Che, you got another one here. We got, there's this sense of accomplishment for a day, and then the next day you're back to a blank page. So, that's the life of the artist, I guess, mate. And we got another one from Ryan O'Connor here. There's almost no other illustrated medium that requires you to know how to draw basically everything from every angle.
Yep.
Yeah,
That's
it's a
true.
tricky game.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. That was a great Sabbath song, Warpage. There you go, mate. So that's a little play on Flock there. And I'd love to see new Mandrake stories too. Actually, Mandrake the Magician, it would be cool, man. Like
We did have a chance to do a young Mandrake in Kid Phantom issue 6, I think it was. That was fun to sort of think about what that might look like. And I know based on I think the first one that came out was a Brenton McKenna story. My mate from up north, I had a design and I was working on that comic, and then he had a short that came out in a Supernova magazine from memory, and I think it's in the first Kid Phantom trade. So that's that was fun. I know that King Features did a Legacy of Mandrake comic, but it felt like that just came and went, and it was a kind of a tenuous connection to what the original was, but it had its moments and a fun style. So,
well, I quite liked Mandrake. I remember Mandrake being real funky in that cartoon series years ago with like the Flash and Phantom and that sort of stuff in it, man. I liked, believe it or not, I liked Mandrake the most out of all of them. I thought he was cool. And still do to a certain extent. So
that's fair.
I've thought about it for a while, but I'll go back and YouTube those videos now. That's how much I like
they're all there. Defenders of the Earth.
You've already done it. Very good. All right.
We have cartoons playing for the birds while they're in their cages. So I've just got YouTube on loop for them. So they watch all the classic cartoons. A lot of 80s cartoon blocks exist on YouTube where someone's just taken Saturday morning cartoons that they've taped and put them online, including all the ads. So if you want a bit of nostalgia kick,
man,
it's crazy.
Check that out. I'd probably recite those ads, man.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, we've got Jeffrey Beats. Great chat. Thanks. Very impressive, Paul. Thank you very much for watching tonight, Jeffrey. Really appreciate the support for Chinwag and for Paul. And Spedsy, g'day, mates. How are you, mate? Straight back at you.
Yeah,
and we've got comment backlog time come up again. I don't know if that's like an ending or like the book end of the comments, or whether they're still coming. I'm not sure, but I guess we'll find out in a jiff. Now, Paul, as we wind down our show, we'll see if there's any more comments coming up. Mate, one question, like we've got an idea of why you do it, because you love it and, like you're passionate about it. Obviously, your passion shines through. You're talented at it. It's in your blood, mate. It's one of those things that got you through, like when you're a kid, as well as your martial arts into You know, like to be, mate. You know, and to feel good about yourself. Thank you very much for Nick May always being a
Thanks, Nick.
supporter.
Thanks, Fitz.
So, mate, what you know, you're sitting at a convention. Big Paul sitting at a convention. Up walks little Paul. What would you say to little Paul, mate? You know, like what would your advice be to little Paul?
Learn to love maths and be an accountant.
Yeah. And every artist that's watching went, you know.
No, yeah, I mean, that's something I always grapple with. Like you were saying earlier, the whys and all that sort of stuff. And I guess it comes back to because we love it, and that's the sort of life we want to lead as best as we can. Little Paul, I mean, I guess that would be the advice. You only live once, so you kind of got to do something that you want to do. You know, sometimes there are jobs that might seem lucrative, but really it's about, can you do that thing day in and day out, and whether you can hold on to your sanity doing it. You know, I remember being when I was loss prevention for years, I became somebody sometimes that I didn't like, and my partner didn't like, because it was just soul eating in a way. You know, you were dealing with the fringe of society. I wasn't a copper, sure, and I wasn't in a prison, but you were dealing with cops and people just out of prison or about to go into prison. And though you had some funny stories and some funny encounters, it wasn't something I wanted to do. I was very good at it. And I remember while I was studying my doctorate, they said to me, we want to fast track you through the supervisor and eventually become a manager of a loss prevention team in your own store. I'm like, yeah, but I don't want to do that. Like when I was bored in downtime, I was wandering around on patrol, thinking about how to overcome a plot beat in a Soldier Legacy comic. You know, planning the next pages. You know, I still do that in a way. Like I'll at nighttime when I lay down to sleep, I'll be rehearsing conversations between two characters in a comic that I'm currently drawing. You know, so it's always there. It's always ticking over. So, you know, I guess it was just picking something that I wanted to do because I liked it, and making sure that whatever that thing was, I could do it repetitively and be comfortable doing it repetitively. And just being open to the way that things work out in life. You know, so you're always sort of striving to do your best, and you're always trying to learn how to do better. But also being flexible enough so that if opportunity does arise that comes up, you know, recognizing how beneficial that opportunity might be to you in the long run. So that's what I would sort of say to little Paul, because I didn't go into university knowing that I was going to be a doctor and then eventually teach in the course and restructure and rewrite the course along with a couple of my colleagues, the very thing that I'd gone in to study a decade earlier. You know, it just, I remember sitting in the car park. I just finished my honours. I had like one issue of Soldier Legacy. I was 10 minutes late for my job in retail at the time. And I got a phone call from the uni saying, you got a really good mark in your honours. You basically got a gold card. What do you want to do? You want to do a master's? You want to do a doctorate? You got a stipend essentially for like a couple of grand, provided that you study next year. What were your plans? And I looked at the empty car parks either side of me and went, I got no plan. I'll come in and talk to you. And then the next thing I know, I'm studying, and I remember sitting in like Centrelink offices, and the employment person that they put you in front of while you're on that look for work stuff is like, we usually just get like bricklayers in here and bricklaying jobs. Like you're getting a doctorate, you've got double degrees, and we don't know what to do with you and what sort of job to put you in. So, it's like you never know where life is going to take you. So just be open to those opportunities when they arise, and just have your eyes, be prepared. Like,
Yeah.
I know I'm dragging the show. I don't mean to, but I'll finish.
Mate, you take your time. This is the fluidity of the Chinwag. Cool.
Thank you. I remember sitting at a DC Comics panel in 2011 at San Diego, and it was called DC Origins, and it was about all these different artists, how they got into the thing. And a good friend of mine, Nicola, was on that panel. That's why I was there watching. And they had Greg Capullo, and they had Jimmy Palmiotti, and they had Gal Simone, and a couple of other people up there. And everybody's origin story started pre 9/11. And what I mean by that is, when you hear about how these cartoonists in the American industry got into their job, they were able to kind of just walk in as a kid, maybe they catch a train or drive down to New York, wander into the office, hang around until they find the editor that they want to see, pester other editors while they're there, stick their stuff on their desks, whatever, right? When I went to DC in 2011 or 2012 or 13, I always get my dates mixed up. Whenever New 52 started, it was a nondescript building in Burbank, and if you remember Men in Black, that movie where he walks in and there's like that big room with the security guard and the big fan going, and he gets into the lift, and it's not until the lift opens that you're in Men in Black, the MIB.
Yeah.
It was the same with DC. You've got a security guard, and if your name's not on the book, you're not coming in, and you get buzzed up into a lift, and it's not till those lift doors open and you walk down the hall and you see like a spinner rack and big Green Lantern logo in the foyer and the Joker costumes in the glass case that you go, oh, okay, this is DC. So, and you get ushered to the desk that you're talking, or the office where you're talking to the guy, and then you're escorted back out. And so there is definitely elements of luck to the way that creators get these jobs. But I could bump into the CEO of Apple tomorrow, and he could offer me one of the highest positions in his company, but I'm not going to have a clue how to pull that job off or be good at it. So, but that's the aspect that I can control, right?
Yeah.
So if I can control doing my best at the work that I have in front of me or what I can do, and be open towards opportunities as they arise, and try to put myself in those positions to begin with, then that's where, as they say, chance favors the prepared.
Yeah.
So, do what you love, work on it, because that's all you can control. Do it because you love it, and then everything else that is attached to it is a bonus. Because if it's all about money and fame, or going to cons and being a guest and getting groupies and fans and adulation, if that's the goal, then you might find it a hollow pursuit if that's not something that you can achieve. But if it's about your development and the love of the craft of what you're doing and what you're trying to tell, then I find that can be more rewarding in itself. And the other stuff is just cherries. Whether it happens for you or not, it shouldn't necessarily matter. Even though sometimes I know from an ego's point of view, it probably hurts sometimes. But that's okay, because it's not all the be all and end all of life. So, at
I
least
think
that's
Oh man, I think that's a very good way of looking at it. It's like backflip backy here. We got calm down. I always loving to you. Great chat. Thanks everyone. See you Saturday night.
oh yeah, Comic Street. Yeah, this Saturday in Brisbane. Yeah, that's
Yeah,
where I'll be. Yeah.
yeah, lovely. Very good. Mate, I thank you for very grateful for you coming on the show tonight. I know it's taken us a few attempts to get
That's
you
okay.
on here over the course of time because you've been busy, I've been busy, and it's just the world, like rolls. But hey, the universe brought us together for, like this evening, mate. And
I'm grateful for being asked in the first place to listen to my gibber. So that's
Oh
cool.
man, you're not gibbering, mate. You're not gibbering. You're dropping good stuff, mate, for a lot of people. As I said, past, present, and future. So, trying to do this for as many creatives as we can, mate. So you're
the diversity of what you and like I've said it to Sizzle before, and I remember Zoran's podcast Graphic Nature gave the same compliment because there's a spectrum of people you talk to, and I appreciate the spectrum, because it's everyone's doing something different. Like I've talked about it in papers that I'm writing, that when you look into Aussie comics, there's people out there that are making comics that we've never even heard of, and you might never even see, because whether they want to go to a con or whether there's not one near them, whether there's no comic stores near them, but they're just making comics and they're putting it out somewhere and they have a following. That's rad. Like, do that. That's awesome. So.
I 100% agree. And the thing is like, and if Sis was here too, like in the on the screen with us, he'd agree. Is like the amount of people. Like you think, to a certain extent, you think you've found a lot of people, but then you realise like there's so many more people, and then there's so many more people beyond that. So there are a lot of creative people out there that are doing their things, and for whatever reason, man, you're doing it. Like it's a beautiful thing. I appreciate creativity in general. I appreciate the comic medium because it's just where my love's at, in terms of storytelling and stuff. And and you're a huge part of it, mate. And thank you for being part of the Chinwag family. Thanks for sharing your story, man. And it's been an awesome pleasure to meet you. It's been one of my goals is to catch up with you at some point, man, and have a good old chat. So yeah, I appreciate it. All right. So as we wind down, everyone, just before I forget, now I'll come back to a wind down. Paul, where can anyone find your stuff, mate, if they want to catch up with you in terms of your comic books and your artwork? You got to,
if you go to masoncomics.com.au, that should have links and things to my work, links to books that you can get from either Gestalt or Frew Publications. Frew's website's phantomcomic.com.au. Gestalt is gestaltcomics.com.au. There's a Human Fly issue 0, I think, is dropping in comic stores this week that I think I did a one-pager for. So there's things out and about. I'll be in Melbourne in a couple of weeks for Metro Comic Con. I'll be in Brisbane for Comic Street this week. I thought that would be fun to go to a local place and catch up with some people and, get rid of some back issues. See how we go. And I think I'm back in Melbourne later in the year for the Melbourne Comics and Toys Fair market. I got that name wrong, but yeah, September, I think that is. But yeah, so I'm around. Otherwise, just Google. If you Google Paul Mason, you'll get like anywhere between the political writer, the world's fattest man, so just don't go to Google Image if you find that. It's pretty gross. He's lost a lot of weight. Good for him, but anyway, don't worry about that.
Yeah, fair enough. Paul's in unusual company there, but look, that's okay.
Yeah.
It makes it lively. All right, so everyone, that's where you can find Paul. Now, don't forget, just at the start of the show, I said a lot of stuff, but the most important thing I forgot is to like and subscribe the channel, because the more likes and subscriptions we get, the bigger the algorithm, works, and the tree grows and it spreads its roots and leaves and branches and grows out to other people so that they may catch on to this show and the other shows that are on the Comex live stream section, which is the Comex network, which is, like and subscribe, YouTube, Facebook, like and subscribe, and anywhere you can find them. All right. So last thing I would like to say, and I always like to leave it on this. We said so during the show, but for myself personally and Shane and Paul talking to him tonight, mental health is very important in the world. There are some people that just don't, it's through no fault of their own, but sometimes pressure just gets to people. Sometimes people feel alone. They can't talk to people. Sometimes people have difficulty speaking about their emotions and what's troubling them. Sometimes if you haven't heard from a friend, just send them a message, say g'day, take into consideration for your fellow brothers and sisters out there, because, there's a lot of things happening in the world at the moment, and some people deal with them a little bit better than others. So if you see someone down, help them out. It doesn't hurt or take any time or money to be kind and compassionate to your fellow human being. So go and make someone smile tomorrow, because it might make their day and might even save a life. Look, I'd like to thank Paul again. Thanks everyone for watching the show, supporting Chinwag. We'll be back again next Tuesday night at 7:30. And look, remember, community is unity, and Chinwag is and always will be made with love. See you later. Be good. See you later, Paul.
Thank you, Lee.
My pleasure, mate.
This show is sponsored by the Comex Shop. Check out over to comex.shop to pick up a variety of Australian comics from multiple creators and publishers, all for one flat postage rate. We hope you enjoyed the show.